All right, people, what's up? We're going to have another hangout today. And today's hangout is going to me be discussing something what I've come up with called atheism's religion and denominations. Now, I bet you're wondering, why do I call it atheism's religion and denominations? Well, the reason why I call it that is because I look at how the general populace of atheists tend to treat atheism and to define atheism. Now, you have atheists who would define atheism as a belief. You'll have atheists who define atheism as a lack of belief. You have atheists who say, well, atheism does not define my personal beliefs. And then I've heard atheists even say, well, atheism can define their personal beliefs, but that their beliefs is based on the fact that, in their opinion, Christians have consistently failed to demonstrate God exists. So I've heard so many different varieties of atheism and how atheism is looked at. And what comes up in these conversations a lot is when atheists say, well, how do we pin down what's correct in Christianity? Because what they like to do is they like to look at the number of different denominations. Like you have Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, so many denominations of Christianity. And then they say, well, it seemed like you Christians can't even seem to get on the same page of what your beliefs are. But I mean, at the same time, then they'll turn around and say, well, atheism is not just one particular thing. You can't define atheism as solely like a lack of belief or as a belief. You'll have atheists who will take what they'll call strong atheism, like a more firm position. Then you'll have those who will take what is called weak atheism, or how they would define it as default atheism, that they merely accept theistic claims. So they'll say, well, you can't just define atheism as just the positive belief. There is no God. You're not an atheist, so you need to talk to each individual atheist, right? And see how they define it rather than you as a Christian just telling them that atheism is this. But then they can turn around and question Christians and say, well, look at what you Christians are doing with all these different denominations. You Christians can't even seem to get on the same page with what you believe. So how are we supposed to take Christianity seriously if there are a variety of different denominations? Well, if that's the line of logic they want to go down, then the same thing about we legitimately and fairly ask the same question. There seem to be a variety of different ways atheism is looked at, and a variety of different ways atheism is defined. So why can't we ask the same questions? And when I talk about how, and this doesn't apply to every single atheist, obviously, but it seems like the vast majority of atheists. Now, I think the one commonality I've seen with pretty much every atheist I talk to, they would say that absolutely. But the problem I see with that claim is they seem to treat it like it's a religion. And what I mean by that is if you look at a number of things like let's say, religion, American atheists, and there are a lot of different atheist clubs and things like that. There's the Reason Rally. So you have a number of different clubs, organizations, conventions, all these sorts of things, you know, in atheism. It's basically like it's the religion of non-religion. They'll criticize believers all day about, the variety of religions, and I mean the variety of Christianity and the practices. But then there are so many different varieties, seemingly, of atheism and its many organizations and things like this. So ask the same sorts of questions about the vast majority of atheists that they do with Christians. And arbitrary standards that they apply for atheism, but apparently atheism isn't supposed to get any sort of analysis to it. It's like it can't be criticized. We have to leave atheism up to the individual, but when you look at Christianity, well, we got to look at Christianity as a whole. It's a lot of denominations. We got to look at it as a whole with its many denominations. But when you're talking to atheists, you got to look at them as individuals. It's just like, what is this? What is this hypocrisy I'm seeing here? You can't sit up here and our religion, but literally do just about everything that is consistent with a religion. The many different clubs, organizations, the conventions, the variety of ways atheism is looked at. It's like they don't ask these same questions. So it's what atheism is. So what I'm trying to find out is, if the question can be asked of Christians, how can we know sect of Christianity is right? Or if they can undermine Christianity by looking at its main denominations, then why can't atheism be looked at in the same way? About those who say atheism is a lack of belief, and those who say it's a positive belief, and then I say, well, it doesn't define my beliefs, or say, well, it does define that my beliefs are based on the fact that Christians have not successfully demonstrated their position. I've heard so many different explanations and so many different ideas of what atheism is, and it needs to come under the same sort of analysis. It needs to come under the same scrutiny that they expect for theistic beliefs. So we have Brother Ecclesiastes in here. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, Tonio? Can you hear me good?
Yeah.
All right. Just catching up.
It is a little low, but I can hear you enough.
Let me see. Hold up. How about now? All right.
So yeah. Were you listening from the outside and my commentary on why I'm looking at atheism as a religion and denominations?
No, I just got in here. I was listening for a second, but I don't got the gist of what you were saying.
Okay, just to lay down the context again real quick. Basically, what my argument is this. If you look at a number of different ways that atheism is defined, let's say some atheists define it as a lack of belief, some define it as the positive belief that God doesn't exist, and some atheists would say, well, my atheism doesn't define any beliefs I have. If you want to talk about my beliefs, then that's a separate question. And then some atheists would say, well, it does define my beliefs, but those beliefs are based on the fact that Christians have, in their view, not demonstrated God to exist. It just seems like there's a variety, and then you have a variety of different clubs, organizations, and atheists.
Denominations, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like, you see what I'm saying with that? What's your commentary on that?
Well, like I was saying, denominations, yeah. You got, first off, you got the first beginning of the word against the gods, right? The Christians were against the pantheon of polytheists and the mythology and all of that stuff. The Christians were against, and they weren't going to bow down to any of their idols. So they called us against the gods, right? So atheists. They label Christians atheists. Now that's, some people are saying that's a myth and all that, but it sounds right, you know, because the Christians would die before they would bow down to any idol. So, and even Jews were like that. There's stories about that in Nebuchadnezzar and all of that, where Nebuchadnezzar had put 3 Jews into a fire, and they survived because God did not allow Nebuchadnezzar to kill them. It was a miracle. Hold on one second. All right. Now, to get to what you're saying about the atheists, yeah. What here is online is against God. What here on YouTube is against God. So they have, I don't care what they say about this whole lack of belief thing. When you're in Hangouts 24/7 and you're hoping and trying to bring Christians in and to try to bring up contradictions and all of that stuff, you are opposing the Christian faith. You are opposing. So therefore you are saying you are against the Christian God. That's what I take from that. And then it's not really it's really, when we see these atheists online, what are they really trying to do? Like I heard one commentary where one debate where an atheist was talking to a Christian, and the Christian was saying, hey, you are listening to respond. You are not listening to actually receive what I'm bringing to you, right? You're not really trying to build. You're just trying to listen to respond, to try to gotcha moments and all of that stuff. So from what I take away from it, a lot of these people are hypocrites, liars, and they'll say, oh, it's just a lack of belief. If it was a lack of belief, you wouldn't even be here on YouTube trying to discourage people that do believe.
Absolutely, man. It's just that, like, why are you conducting yourself in such a way that's consistent with those who hold religious viewpoints? It's like I said, it's like the religion of not religion. They have all these different clubs, organizations, entities, conventions, and
Matt Dillahunty.
Groups. Yep,
Making money.
they do things way too consistent with how people with religious beliefs act. And from top to bottom, it's structured in such a way to where it's like, well, dang, it's like everything about what y'all doing mirrors a religion from top to bottom, but y'all keep denying it's a religion, yet keep acting with what's consistent with a religion. You don't want Go ahead.
their religion is humanism. They believe that
Yes.
they believe that they are the gods and they have the authority. They basically, like, we should have told Hogtie yesterday, his truth, his the truth that he thinks he has is coming from within. And if you think that you have the truth and you're trying to change other people's positions or even mock people that believe in other faiths and stuff, you are in a way believing that you have a standard in which you can, yeah, try to basically look better than us and say, hey, you guys don't have the truth, we have the truth. Look, naturalism, we came about from naturalistic means, and all of this logic and reason came about through uh a natural way of coming about, randomness coming together, and there's no guidance behind it or something.
Yeah, man. So we have Christian man in here. So how's it going, man? Can you hear us?
Doing fine. Doing fine.
All right, cool. So have you been listening to this hangout so far?
Yeah, a little bit. A bit tired, so I can't, I probably don't have everything in my head at the moment. Focusing on another thing.
You said
Proving that
what'd you say?
what?
You said something about like you were tired.
Yeah, I'm a bit tired. I I was awake all night, so yeah, I'm a bit tired.
Why do you want to come into this hangout, man? You're gonna go to sleep in the middle of it.
No, I'm not, brother. Trust me. I have pretty much trekked on pretty hard.
Oh, okay.
I got out of moving today. My brother wanted me to help him move, and I didn't get out of it, but they just didn't need me. His son and his friend helped him out, so I'm able to get on, and I'm happy that I didn't have to.
Yeah, moving sucks, dude. I mean, I'm willing to help people move, but it sucks, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Moving furniture, especially up and down steps, I'm like, oh, this is crazy, man. And then you have to manipulate the furniture the right way, get it in between the doors, and I'm like, oh, heck no, man.
Pinching fingers sometimes.
Yeah, you gotta be careful about that. Make sure you don't drop something on your toes and all sorts of stupid shit.
Yeah. But back to kind of what we were saying. Yeah, it's the humanistic way of thinking that, okay, we have the truth. The truth is basically abiogenesis, evolution. This makes more sense to them, even though like it's a 1 in a million chance that even happened. And when you look at the intricacy of the genes and how they come about, and I mean, it makes no sense to think that randomness created all this glory. But this is what they stamp their, or the hill that they die on, and then they try to make us look the fool. And the part of being a religion, I would say it's more of it is kind of a religion, but it's also an organization against theism in general. Like, you got Christopher Hitchens. He lived his life. He got paid very well from what he wrote and his debates and all of that stuff. So obviously he's against theism. So it's not just a lack of belief. It's a total disbelief. It's a basically a militant way of saying, hey, I don't believe anything. I don't believe any gods, and we're gonna go against. We're gonna mock and ridicule those that do, and try to deconvert society to our way of thinking. There you go with the preaching and the deconversion. So they're trying to actually do things like that. Because if it was just a lack of belief, my friend, you wouldn't have any YouTube atheists or debaters or any of that on here trying to if you were actually listen to this, if you were actually disbelieving, you would be open to the information, and it would be less of this whole mocking and saying you're a fool. You think that this came about through God and all this, but really, if it was actually an inquiry on our belief and saying, okay, I'm open to correction. I'm open to hearing about your Lord. They would be. I know I'm long-winded here. They would be more open to to actually receiving the message instead of as soon as we say something, Antonio, it's a quick. Who's the quickest to it's really a quick gun fight to who's quicker to reply something against what you just brought up. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. It's like, oh, dude, it's yeah. I lack belief, but I'm gonna spend my entire life criticizing the Christian worldview. But I just simply like believe. I mean, what kind of garbage is that, man? Nobody who truly just lacks belief would put that much time and effort into trying to go at one particular worldview. They wouldn't put that much time and effort into saying, "Oh, well, you Christians haven't proven your God. You haven't proven your God. I'm unconvinced. I'm unconvinced." Well, you're unconvinced, and what? So you're unconvinced. Okay. What does that mean that you're not convinced?
Here's something.
What's the implication that you're not convinced? Where you go from here? So you tell me you're not convinced, and what?
Mm-hmm. All right, say this, Tonio. Let's have a quick little debate. Say that you are trying to convince me that chocolate ice cream is better. All right. Just say something like, this is why I like chocolate ice cream.
Okay, look, man, chocolate ice cream is so much better because it just is so much richer, man. The texture's better. The flavor just
What's your
just
justification?
sticks around in your taste buds longer. It just has an overall texture and feeling to it that just ain't there in vanilla ice cream, man. It beats the crap out of vanilla ice cream.
There's no evidence for your claim.
Well, I just told you a number of different lines of evidence for that.
There's no evidence for that claim, and you're a fool.
I see where you're going with it. That's exactly what it is, man. It's like they look at. I mean, but I think it's even worse than that. They don't just look at Christianity as just a sort of a taste of ice cream. I think they look at it as it's not only a bad taste, but it's basically like it's poison. It tastes, not only does it taste bad, but it's like outright poison. It has to be extinguished off the face of the earth. So, yeah, you make a great point, but it even goes much further beyond that, man.
Yeah, it really does. I never hear anybody say, you know what, Antonio, you make a good point. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, it always just fascinates me the amount of time they put into trying to undermine Christianity. And I think one time Veckel told me something that is a really, really good point. He said, "Well, so what? You're not you think the Christian is being irrational? Then what? What do you do with that?" Why do you expect the Christian to be rational? If you think the Christian is going to stick around in irrationality all day, what are you going to do with that? What's the next step? So what? I'm not rational. And Vecca put it like this: it's like I'm not rational to you. So what? Is that supposed to mean something to me? You think I'm irrational? What are you going to do? And then they'll be like, well, if you want to actually contribute something to society, or if you want to actually be honest, you should have that sort of obligation, that human obligation to be honest. You should have that human obligation not to teach lies. And then he will say, well, based on what?
Mm.
I mean, if we're just going to just, just die and just, be obliterated out of existence and just fade into obliteration obscurity when we pass from this life, then why should we give a crap about, being correct? Why should we give a crap about being irrational?
You bring up a good point, because think about this, Antonio. You had, I guarantee you, I'll bet you $5 billion that you'd had no problem dropping Santa Claus. Quick, yes or no?
Say that again.
You had no problem dropping Santa Claus.
I have no problem dropping Santa Claus.
Disbelieving in Santa Claus.
Oh, disbelieving in Santa Claus. I have no problem disbelieving in Santa Claus.
Exactly. Like when you got older or something, the tooth fairy is completely false. I disbelieve it.
Right.
It's no big deal.
Right. By the time I got older, yeah, it wasn't no big deal for me to reject those. Right.
Yeah. Now, the question is to the atheist, why? This is what you should really think about. Why are grown men like me, Antonio, and a lot of everybody else on this internet, why are we so holding on to Jesus Christ and the faith that we believe in? That's the question I want to hear. Why wouldn't we drop something that we easily drop other things? Is that the show of rational thinking? Like I could see if Christians were actually, well, we believe in Santa Claus and we believe in the tooth fairy and all of this stuff still. But no, the Christian actually does show rational thinking and logically thinking on dropping things that the world has told us to believe or we might have held as a child.
Well, can I ask I want to make a counterpoint to that, because I think the Muslims can say the same thing, and other religions who don't believe, other versions of religions that don't believe in, that are not Christian.
Well,
they don't believe in Santa Claus.
Look into it.
But that's what I'm saying. I think your argument just kind of, it limits it to Christianity, but it can be used by all other world religions. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying it's not limiting to just Christianity.
That's the William Lane Craig said this one time to, I forgot his name. He's some physicist or something.
Lawrence Krauss.
Yeah, there you go, Krauss. He said something about isn't I forgot, chaos what you think is so exciting about life, the not knowing. So, but the thing about different religions, I really don't know what to tell you, because I know that they're false. Now, when it comes to atheism, yes, I am against Muslim, all of that stuff. You can preach to me anything about that all day one, but when you think about the difference between religions, Jesus Christ is God saving man, and there's no other way to get to heaven but through Jesus Christ's sacrifice. Now, Muslims and all of this stuff, they believe that they can stand before a holy God on their own as sinners. You could go down the line, just taking apart these other false religions, and I don't know why they're there, but I know one thing: it makes no sense to bring that up. Faith. I mean, even the fact that you reach into the theist world to try to defeat the theist is, I don't know.
Now, I hear this claim all the time, like all these other, many religions, and yeah, I understand that there are a lot of beliefs out there, but in my lifetime, I've consistently, in the aspect, um, in the categorization of believers, I've come across most of my lifetime. Most of the time, they were either Christian or Muslim. Yeah, you have your pagans and this and that, but more often than not, they will either be categorized in, somewhere in Christianity or in Islam, Muslims. So most of the people I met who were believers were in one of those two categories. So I hear this
but we can't
about a lot of religions out there, but I mean, what are we talking about most of the time? We're talking about either Islam or Christianity. I mean,
I don't even hear I don't hear Islam. I'm sorry. I don't hear anyone against Islam.
well, I mean, I'm not saying like against Islam, but those are the two that come up in conversations most of the time. They don't talk about it as being outright against it in the same way they do Christianity. I mean, to be fair, there are atheists out there like Sam Harris who think that Islam is very, very harmful. Respect his honesty in that regard, but most of the time, Christianity is the main one under attack. But my only point is, and maybe people did have different experiences, but what I've consistently seen in my lifetime, I've seen, believers who are usually categorized as either Christian or in, the Islamic faith. I don't see a ton of pagans. I don't see a ton of people in all these other hundreds of religions. It seems like the numbers of people in these other places are very, very minuscule in number. So there are all these other religions, but they're way, way smaller in number. It's like, why?
Well, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's not forget Hinduism. There's over 1 billion people who believe in Hinduism, and the Sikhs, there's over like 200 million people who believe in, or Sikhs. And the Native American religions, there are millions of people who believe in certain aspects of that. Buddhism, for instance. So I think maybe a better example would be that in your cultural context, where you're from, you've only really been able to deal with people from these two religious aspects. But the world is a pretty big place. And you talk about a billion Hindus also believe in many different things. And even within Hinduism, there are variations within what they believe too. So, I do agree online and in our cultural context, it's usually Christianity or Islam. But I think in the world stage, there are billions of people who, Christianity, there's 7 million people in the world. Only 2.2 billion people are Christians. And even out of those 2.2 billion, most of you guys would say Catholics aren't Christian, which takes 1 billion people leaving out of that camp. And then camp, you got most people would say Mormons aren't Christian. So, that number could even be dwindled down too.
It just seems like what we're looking at is just big, viewpoints that can be categorized into a number of subsections. The ones we've named so far is Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. And then you can categorize those into a variety of subsections from there. So I'm seeing that there's like a very, very small number of, big general religions that are just categorized in a variety of different ways. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not seeing, like literally hundreds of religions. What I'm seeing rather is maybe 10 very, very big religions just categorized in a variety of subcategories.
Here's another thing, Antonio.
Yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense.
All right, you got people bringing up Islam. Now, Islam is part of the Judaic religion, right? The Abrahamic God. Now, in here you can look up, Google anything that people have done lifetime studies, just like archaeologists. They lifetime put their whole life into studying this. Now, you could just put up, hey, why is Islam false? Now, in the Judaic religion, if they're from the Abrahamic God, they have to go through with this. And now listen to this. Islam cannot be from God because the prophet of Islam, Muhammad, did not pass God's first test for a prophet. Deuteronomy 18:21 through 22 tells us that God will authenticate those he sends as a prophet by having them perform signs. Muhammad gave no sign. He performed no miracle. Nothing. Therefore, it is false. Can we move on to the next? Why do people keep trying to defend, these false prophets? It's basically just like saying that nowadays we have black Hebrew Israelites preaching people are going to be slaves. God loves everyone. God loves us all. Why are white men going to be slaves? It's a false doctrine. It's clear as day, clear as crystal. Why would people say, hold up, why would people bring up black Hebrew Israelites? Why is that not right? Why is that not why can't we just say that the black Hebrew Israelites are right? Look at the doctrine. It goes against everything Christ teaches. I heard a man say that people should get incinerated, and then he says, I come in the name of Yahshua. Shut the hell up. You're a false doctrine. You need to be slapped. Something. I don't know what the hell is wrong with people. Is it not something sinking in? But do you not see the false prophets?
Well, I can also bring up Mormonism as well, of it being an monotheistic belief, and contradicting the scripture multiple over and over again. I can also bring up all the other most again. Matthew had a good point.
There's an echo in the back.
Sorry. Again, Mormonism is a false religion. Jehovah's Witnesses are a false religion because they deny essential doctrines that are stated in the Bible, that can be found clearly throughout the Bible. You guys hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, again, I brought up Mormonism is a henotheistic religion. It believes in multiple gods. Now you will have Mormons that will say, not really, and then you'll go look up their own hymnal books, and they actually have an entire song called, in their hymnal books, the Star for Kolob, which is in this legend, the Star of Kolob, or the Planet of Kolob, whatever you want to call it. And Jehovah's Witnesses are a false religion because they are the heresy of Arianism, which says that Jesus was just a man who became God, not God in the flesh, which the entire four Gospels would refute. And I'm going to be working on a series on the Trinity pretty soon. That's all I wanted to say.
And multiple, let me ask you this. Do you think it would make sense to say that if atheists are going to ask Christians, then how can we take your belief seriously if it's categorized in a number of different denominations and you Christians can't seem to get on the same page? Then can't we ask the same thing of atheists? Because like I was saying earlier in this hangout, you have atheists that will say that, well, it's a belief, and then you have those who say, well, it's not a belief, and then you have those who say, well, atheism is not a belief and it doesn't define what I believe, and then they'll put whatever beliefs they have in a separate category, and then you'll have the atheists that say, well, atheism does define what I believe, but my belief is based on the fact that in their worldview that Christians haven't given them the evidence, to accept that God exists. And then you have stuff like Buddhist atheism. He dropped out, but I was just about to ask him. It just seems like there are a variety of different ways that atheism is looked at and approached. So I'm just trying to figure out how if they see the fact that there are so many different denominations of Christianity as a problem, how do they not look at atheism as having the same problem? They want to categorize in general Christianity to be a problem because there are so many different denominations. But when you are looking at atheists, you got to treat them as individuals. I just see that as very hypocritical.
No true gospel.
Yo, Antonio, can I give my piece?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Whenever they
I'm
bring
sorry, somebody has a bit of horrible echo. I don't know if somebody should mute.
can I speak now?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Okay, whenever that is brought up, this thing about multiple denominations, I just find it to be ridiculous. How is that going to stop you from believing in Christianity? I mean, even if you pick out which ones are actually following the doctrines or not. It's a pathetic objection if you ask me. That's just pretty easy to get out of the water.
Yeah, man, I don't even think that's their main concern. I think that was sort of a cop-out distraction, if you will, because let's say that Christians were on the same page, and did, believe the same thing. We didn't have all these denominations. We were all on the same page and believe one thing universally, right?
Yeah.
That would not magically make them believers.
And plus, if you ask me, just to be argumentative, the fact that there are different sects actually just proves like how real Christianity is. Because if everyone just agreed, it will be easier for people to just say, "Oh man, you're just acting. You're just acting this. You have a script." But no, there are people out there disagreeing, trying to find out which one is actually more biblical and all that. That just shows true belief and actually just backs Christianity up even more. If you ask me, though.
And second, the entire argument's a red herring.
Yeah, it really is. It has no bearing on whether or not Christianity is true or false. It really doesn't mean any more than if we were to say, well, because atheism is defined a variety of different ways, therefore atheism is false. Like,
or that they're different.
Sorry.
Well, even if we make a Muslim case, well, there's the Shiites and Sunnis. Which one should I pick? Does that make Islam false? No, that just makes a particular sect of Islam not being true over the other.
Islam is false when their prophet didn't do anything. There should be no more Islam. But guess what?
And delivered false revelations.
Yeah, but man still follows it.
And made multiple false claims about the natural world, everything.
Not only that is openly against women, but no, go on to Christians. Their belief is against women, even though it only has to do with women in the pastor seat and all of that. But no, Islam is not against women. It's not against women. It doesn't encourage a rape culture. Christianity does, even though Christianity supports treating people like yourself, being nice, forgiveness, trying to help people get saved. But no.
Yeah. Look at the nations that adopted Christianity. Guess what? Those are the nations that has the most power, the most freedom. There's not all these rules or no,
and not,
we're not judging the world.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Not only that, they seem to have the most common sense. Take Kenya, for example. They're a biblical nation, and they don't have any problems at all.
I wouldn't say that. They still have some problems, but they don't have some of the same ridiculousness that we do.
Oh yeah, they got more common sense than the U.S. All this transgender nonsense. I mean, the majority of these transgenders are probably just attention seekers. There are probably like a minority of transgender people who actually have gender dysphoria, because most of the because the minority of them are not trying to make a freaking monopoly out of their mental illness. Nor they claiming trigger warnings and all this nonsense.
Yeah. And look at the change in hearts, right? Why? Oh wow, we lost everyone. Uh, but basically the change in hearts. Why isn't my black face still a slave to this day? Why was there a big change in the hearts of men in America?
Yeah, man, that's a great question.
I don't know how, but somehow someone's kicking me out or
Nah,
something.
that was a cell drop. You're on a cell phone, right?
Yeah, I'm on
Yes.
an iPad.
A massive cell drop. That's all.
Oh, okay.
But basically what I was saying, why was there a sudden urge to say, hey, you know what? You guys are treating slaves bad, and guess what? We gotta abolish slavery. A lot of people will say, okay, Abraham Lincoln did this in a way where just because he knew the South was getting so powerful, and okay, you can grant that. But the thing is, there's a reason why that people cut that loose. There's a reason why that people don't want to practice in slavery anymore. And America freed all of that stuff.
Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you just doing a mic check?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that it didn't freeze.
Yeah. I just think I'm just very, very just taken aback by just the hypocrisy of what I see from a lot of atheists. Like I said, we have to look at atheists as individuals, but when you're talking about Christians, they look at us as a whole. Well, yeah, Christianity on the whole is just divided on many aspects, but when it comes to atheists, the fact that some atheists define it as a belief, some define it as not. Some say it doesn't have anything to do with their beliefs. Some say it does, but it's based on Christians not showing them sufficient evidence. I've seen a variety of different ways atheists define atheism and look at atheism, and there doesn't seem to be any real universal agreement on what it is with atheism either, other than maybe the fact that I think most of them, if not all of them, have said that it's not a religion. I think that's literally the only consistent thing I've heard from every atheist I've talked to. But other than that, it's expected that people got to look at atheists as individuals. There's no consistent mainstream, supposedly definition of what atheism is. And I'm like, if you're going to criticize Christianity for, having various denominations, then you guys need to look at your own worldviews in the same way and look at, the clubs you have, look at the organizations you have, look at the conventions you have. I mean, you guys act no different than the alleged irrational Christians they talk about. They literally act no different than them. And now, honest atheists would say that, they should be subject to the same criticisms, but most of the time, if they're an atheist, nope. Look at us as individuals. Like I may be a weak atheist, but that atheist over there may be a strong one, and you can't really touch it. But they can touch Christianity all day. I just think that's blatantly hypocritical, and they need to hold themselves to the same standards as everybody else.
and bring they need to eat Joseph Stalin, World War II, killed more men than any religion has ever killed. You got to eat that. Just like you want to, the atheist wants to bring up crusades and all of that. You have to eat what an atheist did also.
let me address the Crusades. Okay, I often hear this argument about the Crusades, saying it was themed and saying that it was done in the name of God. Okay, the Crusaders might have done it in the name of God, but was it even consistent with the teachings of the Bible? Was it even consistent with what God said? Did God even command them to do? No. So why the hell are you even bringing them an objection to Christianity at all? Those are just people again who did something that which they thought they were in their bounds to, but yet they just ignore Scripture.
And third, and also, no.
Go ahead.
And second of all, the Crusades weren't even really fought, not just fought for that thing just alone. It was because of all the times Islamic tribes and groups went over to Europe and almost conquered Europe.
It was a war, exactly.
Oh, it was years of war. It was like hundreds of years before. It was until I forget the French king's name. I think his name was Sir Charles. I could be wrong. It could be a different king. Who actually
King Charles?
Maybe, I don't know. It was I forget his name. He was a French king who went over there and kicked what was about to be probably the last stand for Europe and actually won the battle.
Mm-hmm.
I have to look it up. I have to look up medieval history again.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it right now.
Yeah. Charlemagne, maybe? I don't think so, though.
Charlemagne. It might have been Charlemagne.
I'll look that up. I got to be careful with that. For all those in the comment section, do not criticize me. I do not know. I do not remember at the moment who the French king is.
Crusades lasted 196 years. From from 1095 to 1291. Around that time, Charlemagne. Let me see. No, Charlemagne was before that, I think.
He was I'm just saying that this was before the Crusades. This was like a little bit while before the Crusades. I think maybe like 100 years ago before the Crusades happened. He defended France from the Muslim Tours. I might have even mispronounced that name, so be very generous to me on that one.
To add something else here to the conversation, don't you guys think about the vast difference between how atheists conduct themselves and Christians? And what I mean by that is, when I was talking about the various clubs, entities, and things like that, look at what Christians do when they meet together, like in church service and conferences and things like this. The general thing is praising God. We don't go to these things to mock atheists or atheism. We go there to praise God. There's a positivity there. There's a positive environment. There's a building up of one another and of coming together for worship. But when you look at stuff like the Freedom from Religion Foundation or American Atheists, what they go to do, they go together to criticize Christians. They go together to not say the positive aspects about atheism. They go there to say how irrational Christianity is, how Christianity is poison on society and all that other stuff. They go there to talk terrible about Christians. They don't really go there to talk positive about atheism. They don't really go there to uplift or to inspire more people to live their lives in more ways without God. It's not the same sort of positive aspect. It's like they're about going together to attack, as whereas Christians are going together to build up what they believe to be true. We don't go there. I mean, what service have you went to or convention have you went to? You saw a bunch of believers criticizing atheists. At least I haven't seen it. I mean,
I haven't seen
Nothing but a bunch of retards with nothing to do.
who probably have that as left from their old faith of congregating to each other.
No, I mean, they're so childish. I heard once. I mean, okay, let me say this: for atheists who used to be Christian, for some reason, when they supposedly found out that Christianity was false, they want to spend their whole damn time trying to criticize it, and not only that, insult the people in it. I mean, seriously, how much of a child are you? Did your parents not raise you with any manners at all? Seriously, I mean, there are some things that I used to believe in that I found were false, but I just spent my whole time in a fit of rage, trying to destroy it as if it was my sworn enemy.
It's the lies that that their prophet Richard Dawkins told them.
Nigga needs to eat some freaking Snickers.
yeah. I always like when you had that Snickers line. That's hilarious.
Please, dude. I'm trying to add my radio personality in everything now. Yeah. Attention! Breaking news. Richard Dawkins just announced that he is mad because he has not any Snickers. His grasshopper left him when he was little. His girlfriend dumped him when he was 14, and he has no Snickers. That is why he is a grumpy old man. He has no Snickers.
Yes, like when I go to worship service, we're not talking about attacking atheists. If we're talking about anything other than worship, is what is expected of us in Scripture for us to preach the gospel so that atheists may get saved. It's a positive message to hopefully they come to know the truth so they would get saved. It's not, and the message is we love our enemies. So it's not, we don't get together. Let's see how irrational atheism is. That's not what we're talking about in service, man.
Which is the greatest irony ever. When we go to church service, we just try to find ways to help atheists out, and they just try to find ways to degrade us. It's the greatest irony ever. In their attempt to make Christianity look irrational, they're actually making us look more rational and moral than ever before.
That's right.
I was actually listening to a lecture by Dr. Peter Crave, and he actually did experiment with his students a couple of times. He had two group students, one who were theists and one who were atheists. The theists were the ones who were going to be the ones to play devil's advocate for the atheists, while the atheists were going to play devil's advocates for the Christians. Guess who were the better atheists? The Christians were.
Wait a minute, is that somewhere on YouTube so I can see that?
Yeah, it's Dr. Peter Crave's The Problem of the Problem. It's not. It's a story that he tells about experiment with his students. He does.
Dude, you gotta post that link on the side, man.
I'll find his lecture. The lecture was great on the problem of evil. He's actually he's actually pretty good when he addresses the problem of evil and the problem of pain. But yeah. The reason why is that the Christians have been the reason why he assesses this is that the atheists really aren't that good at actually being better Christians. The Christians are being better atheists.
Hey, listen to this too. Listen to this real quick. Think about this. What is the Christian against? Like, listen, think about this real deep, MP. What does the Christian gospel preach? Is it against? Okay, what sin is it against? It's against sexual immorality. It's against envy, jealousy, pride, greed, all of those things, everything that the Christian is against, right, is a good thing morally. It's against it. Now, is there and is there any scripture that says that the Christians should cast the first stone? And then when you think about the atheist world, why are they against us saying, hey, pornography is wrong, abortion is wrong, murdering is wrong, greediness is wrong, you should not keep
Well,
all it, you should share your wealth, help your neighbor. What is wrong with the laws that a Christian will try to implement?
Well, one thing, I don't want to be rude. I'm actually cooking a roast, but I'm listening to you guys' conversation, and I'm really,
Don't tell me that, man. Don't tell me that, man.
I'm having a good time. No, I'm having a good time. I'm actually having a good time. I'm just not going to be able to respond to this answer right now. But give me like 15 minutes, and I'm right back on, because I am listening now.
All right, technically I did eat earlier. It was a very good feast with some other Christians, but I mean, now I'm hungry again. You talk about roast, man. No, that's like my Achilles heel, man. Roast.
we all got our food weaknesses.
Yeah, man. But,
I'm gonna hold you to that answer.
Yeah, definitely. Let's not forget about that. But yeah, just looking at it like in what our goal is with the central aspect of us loving our enemies. No, they want to extinguish Christianity off the face of the earth. Basically, I mean that's literally what it comes down to.
At least the anti-theists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I was gonna actually go somewhere else with this, but I lost my train of thought. But until I get it back, y'all can comment on it.
They like their sin. That's what it is. They like the sin. And
oh yes, look at. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Cause I got my train of thought back. I want to just throw this in here before I lose it again. Look at it like this too. Constantly they cite like in America the separation of church and state, right? But if you think about it, these are the same people who will be like, well, atheists are underrepresented in politics and this and that.
They get into politics, you retard.
Well, yeah, that too. They'll say, well, atheists are underrepresented in politics and blah, 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 blah. But then they'll readily at the say, well, here's the thing. They shoot themselves in the foot by doing that, because if atheists are underrepresented in politics, then who are the ones, the vast majority of the ones writing the laws, which would entail separation of church and state? There are those with religious belief writing those laws. So the ones with religious belief is saying that we are not to, force our beliefs on you in a theocratic way, because we're not a theocracy. It's those who are the believers writing those laws and establishing those guidelines that we're not going to trip over those who don't hold the same views as us.
To get in there, if there's mostly Christians in there, obviously we're going to vote for the values we like.
Exactly. So the same people who will say that atheists are underrepresented in politics don't even see that they undercut their own argument by not seeing that most of the people who have written the laws were those of religious belief. And if that's the case, then it's those of religious belief writing the laws to stay separate, right? It's those with religious belief writing that, not atheists, generally speaking.
And second off,
when they use that, they are literally giving credibility to the believers, not to themselves. It's interesting.
And second off, that quote comes from Thomas Jefferson, actually, when he was addressing to the Baptist church he was referring to.
Yeah, it's in a letter. It's actually nowhere in the Constitution.
It's meant to be the separate. I'm gonna go find it. by my pocket constitution.
But yeah, but either way you look at it, they're actually giving credibility to the believers when they say that. They're not giving any credibility to atheists because it wasn't the vast majority of atheists who got behind that concept originally anyway. So I just find it very ironic when they bring that up. So anytime they bring that up, they're shooting themselves in the foot. They've committed intellectual suicide right off the bat. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And look at it this way too. Look at the countries which are dominated by Islam as the priority belief system. Now, you have a ton of people trying to flee those countries who are under oppression in Islam-dominated countries. You got a bunch of people who don't hold views of the theocratic state who would try to run out of those countries and escape them. But you have a society dominated by believers in the United States. You see atheists, fleeing from the United States in packs. No. If Christianity is so bad and, so prevalent in society and trying to entrench upon their beliefs and systems, then why don't we hear, a ton of atheists trying to flee the United States into other countries where Christianity isn't so prevalent?
Because Christianity is one of the more tolerant religions. And we we adopt a lot of our modern ethics from classical liberalism, which actually came from Christianity, from Christian ethics, ironically.
I know.
Yeah, show me any country that's a majority Christian influence in it and see how many people are running from it. I mean, like the United States, has a lot of Christian influence in its roots. You don't have a ton of atheists running out the country because they're under threat of persecution or attacked by Christians. It's not happening.
I actually have the First Amendment right here if you're interested for me reading it.
Yeah.
Congress shall make no law making an establishment of respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition government for a redress of grievances. Now notice when it says Congress shall make no law, that means the federal government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Correct?
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with state government, local or state government has nothing to do with that. It says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, meaning will not respect a particular institution of religion, and that's it. And this is referred to Congress at least. A specific branch of our government at least, also.
Well, just to chime in here on this particular point, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
You muted yourself, man. I don't know if you realize it.
No. I saw my thing was, my mic was down. My earphones were down. But two things, just about the Establishment Clause. There's the Free Exercise Clause and the Establishment Clause. That's how the Supreme Court's interpreted the Religious Clause in the First Amendment. It does apply to states through the 14th Amendment, and they call it substantive due process. So, more or less, the states do have to follow the First Amendment and give like the right, all the same rights that the federal government kind of holds in the first in the Bill of Rights. The states also have to do it, and that's because of the 14th Amendment. So
that's actually
state governments are.
Okay, thank you. When was the 14th Amendment made, though?
Reconstruction Civil War, because what happens is a lot of the slaves, the state governments were saying that like for instance, freedom of speech and freedom of and all of these rights were just prohibition against the federal government. So the 14th Amendment was prohibited to say, okay, the states also have to give these rights to its citizens. You can't now. There was no that separation between what the feds can do and the states can do. With personal rights was kind of abolished, and that's what the 14th Amendment did. You could it's called it's not actually called I use the wrong term. It's actually if you want to Google it, it's called incorporation. They've been incorporated, and there are a couple that haven't been incorporated to the states, but the doctrine is called incorporation.
Okay.
All right, but, multiple. But what do you think about what I said earlier about the fact that that it's a lot of believers that tend to be more represented in politics than atheists? Yeah, see a bunch of atheists fleeing the country because there's a lot of theistic influence, or rather, theistic believers in politics. And it's a lot of, theistic influence, in the United States. You don't have atheists just fleeing the country like that, under persecution like that, like as opposed to, in the country on the theocratic law of Islam and Sharia law. You have people of all sorts of belief systems fleeing from there because they don't want to be killed, and they kill people who don't agree with them. So when they say that atheists are underrepresented and you got theistic believers more represented, but it's like the theistic believers recognize that we don't persecute people who don't hold the same beliefs we do. And we understand that just because someone doesn't believe the same thing we do, we're not going to kill them for it. We're not going to. That's not how we rule in our laws. And people of religious belief, most of them recognize that. So you can't make this argument against like religion or a lot of religious believers when it's mostly religious believers who recognize those arguments, who recognize that we hold our views, but you shouldn't be criticized because you take a different view than us. You don't have atheists fleeing the country from a nation historically dominated by theistic influence. You don't see it. You don't see it in anywhere really in history at all. But if you are of any sort of differing belief under Islam, you pretty much a dead man.
Well, I'll say this: there are in each different society, there are different consequences for your beliefs. If and I definitely agree. If I'm in Saudi Arabia and I say I don't believe in God and Muhammad, I don't believe Muhammad was his prophet, that's a death sentence. I'm saying I'm going to die for those beliefs. But here in the United States, it's obviously different because we found that is immoral. But I also think there are consequences here for if you say you don't believe in God at all. If you say I don't believe in God, you're probably not going to be able to be president. There's going to be a lot of social stigma that goes along with it because most polls, when people say what's the most mistrusted group in this country, atheists is number one, even over over politicians, over all these other groups. Atheists are usually. So I think the persecution, the atheist persecution is not, they're being killed in the streets, but more or less this social stigma, just kind of like being gay or lesbian or what have you.
What?
Okay, so
what?
The social.
I was making an analogy to what the social stigmas. That's what I was making.
Social stigma.
Oh, these social stigma. Well, let's say I entertain that for a second and assume that you're correct. Are these social stigmas anywhere on the level of getting your head cut off?
Man, you hold up. This man told a blatant story.
Oh wait, can I say something first?
Fable as big as Rayman Legends. Listen to this. What he just said. You got atheists online. Man, I see them all day. Twitch TV, social media.
Oh yeah,
The amazing atheists making millions of subscribers. Where's this social? What?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're mistaking the general for the specific. You're doing one specific claim, and you're saying it's general. But they've done polls and they've asked people, and this just happens to be true. If you deny the fact that there's a social stigma presented with atheism, then there's not. I can't. That's just a fact of society. You can look that up. That is a fact.
And there's no social stigma against Christians, like those who don't want to like bake cakes for those who don't agree with their views and things like this. There was an issue about this guy who got suspended because he went up against his instructor for not wanting to step on a piece of paper that his instructor had them write Jesus on a piece of paper, put it on the floor and step on it. He didn't want to do that. He went to I think like the dean or some other authorities about the matter, and he ended up getting suspended over it. So you tell me that there is no stigma against Christians that happen in this country? Whoa, dude.
Well, hold on. I never said there was no stigma against Christians. I don't even know where that came from. I was just talking specifically about if you're an atheist, the stigma that is attached to atheism in limited circumstances, and that's been put out by polls and by asking people their opinions and to see which groups are the most mistrusted. Atheism usually comes up number one. And again, I would even lead you to politics and say, when was the last atheist that we've had be president? All of them have been Christians because 90% of the country is Christian. So it's there is I'm not saying it's to death or people are getting slaughtered because of their beliefs. What I am saying is that if we're having an honest conversation, I believe that there is some stigma, just like it is if somebody said they were gay. There is a stigma to that, and there's a stigma to atheism.
Well, it just seems like to me that if I were to go down your line of argumentation, that there's a stigma to a variety of different people with viewpoints, not specifically gay people. I mean, so if you're going to say that there's a stigma, why not apply the stigma argument across the board to a number of different persons? So you're going to say if there's a social stigma against gay people and whatnot, why not also argue equally there's a social stigma against Christians as well? That's what I'm saying.
I agree with that, though. I do not agree. I think now in today's time, there is a social stigma against Christians because, for instance, if and you see it every day when people say, Christians are being, like now in school, for instance, my daughter, when she goes to school, she had said something about going to church and believing in Jesus. And she came back home and she was crying. I'm like, what's going on? Why are you crying? She was like, oh, they don't believe that God exists. And I was like, babe, you can't, don't worry about what other people believe. Just understand what you believe, and, have faith in what you believe. But it was interesting because those kids were calling her, they were saying, well, she's worshiping a zombie. And I'm like, worshiping a zombie? And she is, my daughter, is developing her Christianity. And the social stigma of her being a Christian now in today's time is more difficult than it was in our time because there are. So I'm not saying this is specifically for atheism. I'm just saying that there is a social stigma with atheism. And I also agree with you that there is some social stigmas with Christians. So
thank you.
Exclusive.
Man, the social stigma seems to get them a lot of likes and a lot of love online.
Oh yeah, dude, easily.
Oh my goodness.
Oh wait.
But the social stigma for Christianity gets Creflo Dollar $64 million jets. You know, but if you want to just pick out one or two people, you can just pick out one or two examples and say these people are doing well. But if we're having just the conversation about social stigma, we all know if you say something about Christianity in the wrong city, people will look at you a certain way, and if you say that you're an atheist in certain settings, people will look at you a certain way. There's certain things that you can't do. So.
No, but Christians generally don't want to cost people their jobs or say that, they should be demoted from particular positions or want to shut them down or anything like that. That's not what generally Christians are going to advocate for. But it just seems like there's a totally different standard when you're talking about a lot of atheists or, those who may hold certain particular biases. Like if they may question evolution, maybe at the center of their questioning of evolution is their Christian beliefs or other theistic beliefs. And if they bring those criticisms to mainstream academia against evolution, they're going to, be demoted or have their careers outright destroyed and all this other crazy nonsense. So I'm not saying that there aren't, stigmas against atheists, but I think the main problem is on the atheists or on those who don't particularly hold what are more secular views, which are usually stuff like humanism, evolution, things like this. The stigmas, for those in academia, are usually applied more harshly, consistently against those who are questioning evolution, those who identify as Christians. The stigmas in mainstream academia are more slanted against believers, not against those who are generally secular in nature and their beliefs.
I agree with that.
Also, like Hogtie last night was saying, if anybody believes opposite of me, you are mistaken. That's his way of thinking, right? That sounds a lot like the scientific takeover of atheism in evolution. Basically, you got if you disagree with evolution, you are mistaken, and you are basically discredited and rolled up as some young Earth creationist retard.
It's basically like they blacklist you and blackball you.
Yeah, because you're going against what they hold is true. Just like Hogtie said, you are mistaken if you go against what I consider to be true.
Oh yeah. Did you have something you wanted to weigh in on this earlier, Ohms? Can you hear us?
I just wanted to ask multiple personality what he meant by social stigma.
Are you asking
what I meant by
social stigma? Hey, was you asking what he meant by social stigma? Oh, there's a delay, man.
Yeah, I think that's what he said. What I mean by social stigma is that if you were to come out as being an atheist, and you're the face of atheism, there are certain things that you would be barred from doing. Not, for instance, you could still run for president, but you would not be able to become president. Because the stigma that atheists are not to be trusted, and that's what I'm talking about. It's just the social stigma. It may not be. It may be less true for a Muslim than it is for an atheist. Most people, and these are the polls that have been taken, have said even Christians would more likely vote for a Muslim than an atheist.
Not me. No. I'm voting for the atheist compared to the Muslim.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd probably lean towards say Sam Harris ran, and somebody who
Raza Allen.
hadn't belief in Islam ran. If those two were up against each other, I vote for Sam Harris in a heartbeat, man.
Yep. It's not really. I don't know if that's the agreement. I mean the stigma where atheist. You got a echo. Where we'll say, okay, an atheist is running for office. He's not to be trusted. I don't think that would be my first reaction.
Well, look at what happened about 2 years ago in South Carolina, where someone to their state got elected, and when he was getting sworn in, he didn't say "So help me God." He said, "On my solemn oath," and they tried to impeach him.
I'm sorry.
In God, so that that's something that actually happened, and he was an atheist. I'm not sure what happened after if he actually got impeached, but it was like a big news story that he happened to be an atheist, and people were saying that he never said or told people that he was an atheist. He didn't think it was something relevant, but then when people found out, it seemed like there was this backlash because people felt like they were misled. Like they would have made a different choice if they would have known what he believed. So, and that's what I'm talking about. But again, it's difficult when you're talking about specific examples and try to broaden it out to a general example. That's why I kind of like to use the Pew Research studies and things of that nature, because it kind of just shows the way generally people feel about certain groups. And I think, when you look at atheists, people generally have a negative feeling about that group particularly.
Well, let me say this real quick. My thought on politics, I don't think, and this isn't something that I live and die by, but I think that Christians should go by what the scripture says and give to God what is God's and Caesar to what is Caesar's. I don't believe that we should actually be in politics, therefore let you have your world and let you have your way, and I don't therefore you won't bring any fault to Christ, because really man is man. You got to separate the two between man and Christ, right? So when we start dabbling in politics, our sinful ways get caught up in things, and then you may start judging people, which you shouldn't be doing. That's in scripture. Christians shouldn't judge the world, but yet they want to be a part of the world and be a part of the politics of the world. But if we stepped aside, guess what? Blame your atheist self and blame your own self. That's what I would say. So I think Christians shouldn't even be a part of politics. That's my opinion.
But do you really want to have like only atheists in government, honestly, to run it and just oppress Christians with laws outright? Do you really trust the vast majority of atheists to be in those positions?
No, I really wouldn't.
I wouldn't even care. I let them see what they're doing to their fellow man, and let them see the mirror. And who's to blame for that?
Oh, I see. Basically, You're saying that see more atheists being accepted into office, and then we see the oppression level skyrocket. Then we will see who's the real problem.
Exactly. Take away their excuse by blaming Christians and blaming Christ because of Christians sitting in there and they're bringing up laws, which I agree with. But when they actually, the laws that the Christian would say, I'm not against, but they use it as some persecution of what they believe, right? They're using it as they don't want to do this and do that, or gay marriage or something. Let them have that. Get out of the way of that. Let them do what they want to do and watch how it turns out. That's what I want to say.
So you're saying basically if they are going around pontificating that, yeah, we could be good without God. Yeah, society would be better without God. Then you want them to basically prove it, right?
Yep. I want to see it would be nice to see all the Christians just move to an island and let the atheists and all of that just have their own world and watch them. Hey, we want to get back to the what you guys had. Yeah, because guess what? Those atheists, you could no, there's no more crime against. I would say, why is murder? Why is murder against the law? Why, in your atheistic worldview, what is wrong with murder? Oh, because it affects me. But hey, guess what? There's nothing moral. There should not be anything morally wrong with murder. If a man can say, "Hey, you're imposing on my how I was born, I feel like I should be able to murder and rape a woman." What do you have to say against that man? And while the Christians are over there in their island saying, "Hey, you don't murder nobody, or if you do, you get locked up," take it to the atheistic world, which they always try to steal from the Christian view and say that murder is wrong because of because it's this is they had nothing to stand on. But really, what I would say if I was an atheist, guess what? I don't like you today. I just woke up in a grumpy attitude, and I should be able to blow your brains out, kind sir. Good day. What's holding me back from getting my rage out? What's holding me back from taking Beyonce and raping her? What's wrong with me doing anything that I please? Okay, now leave them in that world and leave us in our island. And I guarantee there's gonna be atheists swimming to that island, my friend. We want to come back here.
Hey, multiple, are you there? Because I want to ask multiple.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you this. Is there any particular society that you would prefer? Like, would you prefer a society where it's the vast majority of theists in power, or would you be more preferential or trustworthy of society which there are atheists in power, or do you not prefer either? Is there any particular one you would prefer to be ran by, or neither?
Well, I'll say it's an interesting question because, like, if I went to Saudi Arabia, for instance, I wouldn't like that at all. That's crazy. That's too much theism. Suppressing. And then if you're talking about on the atheistic side, that's North Korea. I wouldn't want to be in North Korea either. You know what I'm saying? So I think you have to have a healthy balance. Right now in a society that we live in, the theism has brought us these rights and these, as they say, God-given rights, which I agree with. So I wouldn't. I don't know. I would want to live in a society where all viewpoints are respected, and we can all have these type of debates, and we can say challenge each other's viewpoints, and they come to some type of consensus. So no, neither one would be. That sounds like North Korea or Saudi Arabia, and neither one of those would be something that I would want to go live in. So.
But you can't dispute that in this country, those of theistic belief represent most politicians in office, and atheists aren't getting killed or persecution, like being thrown in jail because they're atheists or something like that. We haven't had the test experiment, obviously, where it's atheists in charge of this country. We've shown consistently over time to where there is no serious oppression of atheists in this country when theists are running, particularly mostly those who are typically associated with Christian theists in charge. That's been consistently proven over time. Yeah, I know you talk about the stigmas here and there, but any serious thing like being thrown in prison for life, being killed or something like that, no, that's not happening. While you have a lot of those who tend to align with the theistic Christian belief, that's not happening with atheists in this country, man. I just don't believe that would be the same sort of thing with Christians if there were mostly atheists in those positions. I think it would be a complete 180 difference.
Well, let's if we look at this classically through history, obviously I think we can all come to an agreement that Christianity is a more ancient religion than, let's say, Islam. So Islam being relatively new in comparison to Christianity, I think has had the ability to kind of get up out of these growing pains, because at one point, if you were an atheist, Christians would have killed you. You know, Galileo, for instance, said that the Earth went around the sun, and he almost lost his life.
No.
And so hold on. Let me finish my point. I think I don't want to. I'm not saying that all Christians were thinking that way, but there was a Christian theocracy that did oppress differing viewpoints at one particular time, and now I think what happens is through the Protestant Reformation and different types of ideas, people have come to grow and say, no, the Christianity that I believe in does not represent that. Jesus did not represent killing apostates or, these type of consequences for believing in these type of things. So the Christianity that we live in now, I think, is a development over years and years and years of kind of trial and error and understanding what works best from a Christian perspective.
Can I reply, or Christian man, you want it?
Well, you go Christian man, and then you.
I want to go on the comment about Galileo. That entire thing about him saying the Earth revolved around sun, that was not the reason why he was almost killed. He actually made an entire mockery of the Pope. That's why he was almost killed.
Okay.
Well, then we just disagree with that. I disagree with that, but
can you prove your claim, Christian?
There's an entire video that JP Holding did on this topic. If you guys are interested, I'll get a link to that if you guys are interested in the video. He goes over that one.
Yes, there's a pretty deep explanation. I think we should go ahead and turn it over to you, Matthew.
What I was gonna say is, okay, he's saying Christianity has evolved. Guess what? The Torah is still the same. The Tanakh is still the same. I don't see the doctrine change. Okay, man might have implemented things which are not biblical. Like if you look at the Old Testament, the Jews were actually penalizing themselves, right? They had a theocracy. God was over them. Therefore, if a man sinned in that theocracy, they were stoned to death because of sin. And also, the main key is that they had God in the Ark of the Covenant, where he could not tolerate, he would not tolerate sin of any kind, as he was using the children of Israel as the tool. Now, this whole thing where men get it all twisted up, which I don't see how, especially in the Christian theocracy, how are they going to the Old Testament and acting as if they are the Jews with the Ark of the Covenant, going through making judgments, God's judgments on nations? How does a Christian, which the New Testament is totally against, the New Testament, there's no Jew nor Gentile. So you have to blame man for any type of theocracy, especially when you talk about a Christian theocracy. If they were close to killing Galileo, how does that back up with the doctrine of Jesus Christ? You have to blame man.
There are a couple of things I want to respond to, but the first one I'll respond to is for Matthew is the context of, let's say, the Old Testament laws. I rarely use the argument that about these Old Testament laws being bad, because I believe that you have to look at those laws in the context of the world that they lived in. Now, you're talking about generally, and we can all agree Back in the time of Abraham, these were nomadic tribes. These were people who were living off the land, going from place to place, trying to regain resources. So let's say, for instance, you brought up the fact that if somebody did something wrong, they'd be stoned to death because they were under the covenant of God. But I would suggest, or I would put forth that I think that's not telling the full story. I believe if you think about the culture that they were in, the nomadic culture, what do you do with someone who, let's say, rapes a woman or steals something or commits a murder? Do you put them in jail? Because if you do that, if you build a jail and lock them up, then you have to feed that person. You have to clothe that person. You have to now spend resources on taking care of that person for what? Years, maybe even their entire lives. And I don't think back then in that particular time, those cultures had that type of infrastructure to do that. So a lot of the penalties for breaking God's commandments was death, because that society couldn't take care of a rapist, for instance, or a murderer, for instance, because, again, they had very, very limited resources to even take care of the people themselves. So in that cultural context, I think you're talking about first century, before the first century BC. I think you're talking about a different world. Today, what you're saying would work, but back then, I don't think it does.
Well, let me respond to that, multiple. Now, you got to ask yourself this question. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, I agree with everything you said. You got to look at this angle too. Now, going on your trial and error point, who were the people who were going against such things to implement change in this world to what we see today in Christianity and like the Western world here in the United States, for example? Who were the people, in that instrument of change? Do you think it was atheists? Like, if you take the Crusades, for example, do you think it was atheists who implemented that change? No, it was other Christians. There you go. So if you want to look at any particular culture in which we assume, for the sake of argument, that there was a lot of ills happening in the world because of Christianity, then how were those ills done away with and changed? Other Christians. There you go.
No, I agree, and that's exactly that's my point. My point is that each person comes to the doctrine with their own beliefs and their own, and God. I believe if you guys are believing that God gives you guys this moral aptitude, nowadays you guys understand that certain things are wrong and God doesn't command these things, and that people may have been mistaken before, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that was a Christian doctrine. I'm saying people could get it wrong, and now people have a different view of it. But that doesn't mean that all Christians held that viewpoint even back then. So I don't want to. I hope that it hasn't come over that I'm trying to overgeneralize all Christians even back then as having those same viewpoints. I'm just putting forth a reason why I believe that in that cultural context, those things had applied differently than they would today. If that makes sense.
And there was an internal change constantly for that stuff to stop. Now, understanding that not all Muslims are violent, and the overwhelming majority of them are not, in fact, violent, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be an indication that there was that same sort of internal change in Islam over a period of time. There doesn't seem to be that internal change to where those countries that have a lot of Islamic influence in it are still killing people who don't believe what they do. I don't see that same internal change in those countries.
Well, that's not true for Malaysia, which is 90% Islam, and Indonesia and Turkey, which is a NATO ally. There are, and which has a very large secular population. Again, it's we are usually presented with the most extreme forms of Islam. But if you talk about Turkey, which is a NATO ally, which fought on our side of World War II, and you're talking about Indonesia, Malaysia, these are moderate countries where these things aren't happening. So there's a varying different viewpoints even in Islam.
So how many countries ran by Islam are generally tolerable places to live in as opposed to others which are not tolerable, ran on Islam? Do the countries that are ran by Islam, which are tolerable to live in, by far outnumber the ones which aren't?
Yeah, I think that there are less ones that I would choose to live in. If I had, so I put a gun to my head and said you had to live in a Muslim country, choose one. That's a hard choice for you to make. I'm like, oh, I don't know, and I probably would pick either Turkey or Indonesia or Malaysia. But even that is like, oh my God, I'm moving to a Muslim majority country. But I would say that. So to answer your question, I think they are very limited. But again, Islam has about 500 years of catching up to do, and to kind of getting through all these. They're getting through all these kind of growing pains. They're still getting through all this, the cultural context and having these very harsh laws and I think Christianity had to go through that same process. But now we can't look at I think it's not fair to just look at them and say these are the new kids on the block and they're getting it wrong, because again, I think if we take an honest view of Christianity, Christians got it wrong. Some Christians, not all, got it wrong at a certain point, and now I think we all have come to a consensus that some of the things that happened before were wrong, and now we're trying to get it right. And I think that's a plus for Christianity. I don't think it's a negative.
I think it's a lot of.
I'm talking too much. Go ahead, man.
I was just gonna say real quick, there is no true Scotsman fallacy when a Christian says there's a difference between a true believer and people that believe in vain. Antonio, they are succeeding in turning God into a run of the muck religion, just like these other false, fake ass religions. Buddhism and all of this stuff. They are. This is what they're trying to turn it into, as something that we are following doctrine. Men get it wrong, and all of this. But guess what? In Christianity, there is a true relationship with God. I can't prove it to you, but I'm sorry, my friend, but this is no run of the muck. Just this is the doctrine and this is what it is said. No, there is a reaction between God and that individual which changes the person. Repentance. It is nothing that I can describe to you, but this whole theocracy thing that you were talking about earlier, where Christian theocracies were threatening Galileo, that is from vain believers. This is from people that have not been changed. This is from people that are trying to use the doctrine of Christianity to further some other goal. I can't see how any Christian brother can say, hey, Antonio, you come up with the idea, oh, guess what? I'm going to kill you because what? How is that in the scripture? How is that in repentance? I'm done. I'm done.
And I'm not saying that there aren't, those fringe extremists out there, like the one who was allegedly a Christian, like that Robert Deere guy who shot at that Planned Parenthood clinic. I'm not saying there aren't those extremists out there, but I mean, you go up to your typical Christian in many places in the world. You go up to your typical Christian. I mean, even some of the more extreme ones, like, and I don't even know if you could call those Christians, but for the sake of argument, let's call them Christians. Like the Westboro, those insane clowns. Let's call them Christians for the sake of argument. Now, they may be holding up signs, right? It says God hates fags. But I mean, how many of them are going to be literally killing gay people? You probably aren't going to see that a whole lot, as opposed to people in a lot of other Islamic run countries who will literally throw gay people off roofs. Even the Westboro Cougs, you won't generally hear about them killing Muslims and gay people and other folks who don't believe what they do. You won't even hear that. Yeah, these people are insane. but you won't generally see them killing folks or hear about here's another Westboro person killed this Muslim or this gay person. You don't see that in the news. if somebody from the Westboro church if those were regular occurrences, you'd see those in the news all the time, without question. You don't see that happening. So even you can look at a lot of Christians today, even if I were to accept for the sake of argument, you look at extreme Christians like the Westboro people. They're not going to be going around killing those who don't believe what they do. Generally speaking, that's not going to happen. I just can't say the same or see the same thing when it comes to Islam. There is clearly a distinction between the two worldviews. That was pretty much my take on that. Did you guys want to weigh in on that?
The two worldviews?
Yeah, well, I'm just weighing in on the fact that, the extent of extremism you might see from like the most extremist of Christians, like the Westboro kooks, the extent of the extremism you might see is them holding up a sign that says "God hates facts." You generally probably are not going to see them throwing gay people off roofs like you do in other Islam-run countries where the extremists of Muslims are literally killing gay people. Generally, the extremists are those who say they are Christians. Even if I were to accept they were Christians for the sake of argument, the extremists, in Christianity are probably not going to be killing gay people and Muslims and people of other beliefs. You just ain't going to see it. Anybody there?
No, you made a good point. That's it's hard to rebut a good point.
Yeah, so like I don't pretend like there have been no ills in Christianity or anything like that, or believers haven't done some bad things. I don't pretend like that hasn't happened. I mean, to argue against that would be it would be insane. It would be an absolute lie. But I think the progress that has been made in the world with believers has been vastly, vastly significant and not to be overlooked. I don't really. I'm not saying there has been no progress in Islam, but I mean, Islam to me seems to be expanding all the time, and it seems to be actually getting worse with the expansion of Islam, not actually improving.
I don't know. I personally am not well versed on Islam, so I wouldn't be able to even really comment intelligently about that. But I do think that no matter, I agree with the point that yes, any doctrine can be perverted to a sense where people can do things, say they're doing it on behalf of this doctrine, and we can all say that they're wrong and they're not doing it on behalf of Christianity. But I just think we have to be consistent across all varying viewpoints when we see that happening to also not make that same mistake.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I don't want to be the only one talking here. So I mean, if nobody has anything to say, I'm probably just going to end the hangout here. But if anybody has
quick
any other
question.
things, yeah, go ahead.
One thing I did want to ask about is earlier. I forget what you guys were talking about proving Christianity, and I thought I heard somebody say they had proof that Christianity was in fact true, and it wasn't really a faith-based opinion. And I was confused because I didn't understand. I thought the Christian position was that you had to believe it on faith. So I just wanted to see if I heard maybe misunderstood, or can somebody clarify?
Say that. I might have not been paying attention, but I don't specifically recall anybody in here saying that. I don't know. I might have missed it.
Oh, I'm not sure. Oh, I might have heard incorrectly.
Oh, okay.
And what was Hogtie saying yesterday too about? Because I saw him and DD get into it, but he seemed to be almost rambling a little bit, and I was kind of confused about where he was going. Like, what was his overall point?
Regarding specifically,
Was he trying to disprove the presuppositional argument?
we were just having a discussion of showing why there are problems, if any, in pre-sub. I just read that whole hangout to see if I can find any atheist way in on that. I mean, I titled it like 1 hour for atheists to show up, because what usually happens is we would host hangouts to invite atheists to come in, and then when we invite them, like very few will show up. Sometimes none show up at all. We would like say, "Oh, I want to turn this into an echo chamber," and then they don't want to come in. So I basically said it expecting no atheists to show up, but lo and behold, Hogtie did show up, and we had a conversation about it.
It's always. Do you guys find it very frustrating? Like, what? I've always been curious. Like, for instance, I don't believe in the Christian worldview. I think that's obvious, but I do hold it open as a possibility. What makes it frustrating? Like, it seems like you guys are frustrated, like when someone says that. Like, do you guys believe that I'm just lying, or do you guys believe that I'm being disingenuous when I say, I don't find a good reason to believe? Like, it almost seems like trying to understand the Christian viewpoint from Christians. It's almost like it's difficult to have a conversation with someone who thinks that you're being dishonest about what you believe. So that's why I think sometimes it's intimidating to come in to some place when people believe that you're just more or less faking it, that you believe the Christian viewpoint is correct and you're just denying it, the truth and unrighteousness, so to say. So is it why? My question is, why do you guys believe that someone like me, who you guys have spoken to multiple times, and I'm as honest as I possibly can be, or as you guys, from what you guys know, would you guys think that? Do you guys think that I'm actually being dishonest when I say that I'm just not convinced of the Christian position?
When I speak with you, brother, I think you may very well be on the path potentially to coming into a belief in Christianity. You sound very honest, and God may very well be working through you. So from what I could tell, you definitely seem to be honest, and God may very well be putting you on the path. I mean, you tell me you're not convinced, but I think the way you approach things, that it may be actually the case that God is very well putting you on the path to eventually becoming a believer. So that's how I look at you, man. But in the most general sense, I think I just stand on what Scripture says. Romans 1:18 talks about those who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, and in the most general sense, those who are not believers, they are suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, and I stand by that. I can't be a true believer and don't stand by that, and I consistently see evidence to that when I'm engaging atheists. When a lot of us believers in here engage atheists, I'm consistently seeing the attacks against Christianity. I'm constantly seeing the mocking of the Christian worldview, particularly here online, and especially on Google Plus. I'm seeing the constant mob mentality of atheists going after the videos of believers and thumbs down in their videos. I'm seeing even that atheist I talked to the other day, Tom Leeds, talking about well, we're just gonna make fun of Christians because they believe crazy things, and that's the sort of stuff I'm consistently seeing from the vast majority of atheists that I come into contact with. So from my experience, and I'm not speaking for their experience, but I'm speaking from my own, my experience with the vast majority of atheists I've come across perfectly validates what Romans 1:18 says.
Well, I don't know if you guys can still hear me. Can you guys still hear me? All right. Yeah, one thing, and G-Man brought up an example the other day, and I actually went and wrote it down because it kind of it helped me understand what I think sometimes the confusion between my position, I think you guys' positions are. And G-Man gave the example. He asked me a very interesting question. He said, can you present any evidence that God doesn't exist? What arguments do you know against the existence of God? And I had to be extremely honest. I said, listen, I do not know any. I do not know of any. The only one that I do know of, I believe, is a bad argument, the absence of evidence argument. And you would agree with absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I think we all would agree that that's a bad argument. Then his conclusion was, well, why don't you believe in God? And it seemed like everybody in the room also came to that same conclusion, that, hey, if you don't have any evidence against this proposition, you should believe it. And it's interesting because, I went back and watched that video, and then I looked up an example I think probably demonstrates how I understand why I don't accept that same line of reasoning, where if I don't have any good arguments to disbelieve something, I should believe it. And it was how science, even if we look at this guy, how science has said there are more planets than grains of sand on all the beaches on all the beaches of the Earth. There are more planets out there than that, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of more planets than grains of sand on every beach on the planet Earth. So that's a lot of different possibilities. And if I was to make the claim that there's a planet of pink unicorns, I'm talking about pink unicorns, a full planet like Rainbow Pony or something like that, and that was my claim, is there any evidence that you would think you could provide that claim is false? And I don't think that you could. I don't think that if somebody made that claim to me, I don't think I would be able to provide any evidence that in this vast universe there's not a planet of pink unicorns. So in that same, if I was to use, I think you guys' line of reasoning, I would have to believe that. I would have to believe that there was this planet of pink unicorns out there, because I don't have any evidence to prove that it's not true. And it almost starts coming down to the fact, then how do I know which claims are valid and which claims are not? Because now I can't disprove the Muslims' claim. I know some of the ecclesiastics were saying, like he mentioned some inconsistencies with their scripture, but if you talk to one of the billions of Muslims, they wouldn't be able to do this too. So that's kind of my difference. I think my difference in thinking between myself and, let's say, G-Man. And I hope that illustrated it well.
Well, sure. Let me comment on that. I think those who are ignorant. Hold on a sec. I got in the phone. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. I think those those believers may be ignorant on certain things about how they look at evidence in that way. Let's take Santa Claus, for example. I wouldn't say like merely the absence of evidence of Santa Claus is a good argument, but rather that we have positive evidence that Santa Claus does not exist. It's not merely the lack of evidence, but the positive evidence that Santa Claus does not exist. I mean,
right.
Constantly looked
exactly. If Santa Claus existed, we would necessarily hear reports that presents in many homes would show up with absolutely no explanation at all. That we would necessarily hear about that. Yet we don't.
Say that again. You went out for a sec. Could you repeat that?
I said if Santa Claus existed, we would necessarily hear numerous reports that presents were showing up under Christmas trees with no explanation.
Yes. So there is not just the mere lack of evidence, but the positive evidence against.
That's positive evidence that he doesn't exist.
Yes.
Right? Now, why don't we hear a handful of reports of people saying there were presents that no one knows where they came from? Right? I mean,
Yes.
surely in this large population in North America, somebody would see Santa Claus. Surely there would be some type of observation at the North Pole, unless somebody wants to pull an ad hoc explanation that Santa Claus is invisible.
Yes. So do you see it's not merely the lack of evidence, but the positive evidence? And if we're looking at pink unicorns, we would approach it in a positive aspect in that way too. Does that make sense?
Antonio, the problem is when the skeptic says that there's an absence of evidence, that is an assertion that what exists does not constitute evidence of a creator. And on what basis do they say that? Now, your usual knuckle-dragging atheist will say, you're shifting the burden of proof. No, anyone who makes a positive claim about the nature of affairs, okay? If you say that there is evidence or not evidence, then you have to back that up. I had an atheist yesterday who said there's no evidence for God. And I said, can you demonstrate that there is no God? And he said, no. I said, all right. So you can't say that the universe is not evidence of God by showing that there is no God. I said, do you know what did produce or cause the universe? And he said, no. Well, then, if you can't show there's no God and you don't know what did produce the universe, on what basis do you declare that the universe is not evidence for God? Why? Because you think that naturalism is a better explanation? Right?
Exactly.
Now, if that's their reasoning, and you heard Blowhard Hogtie yesterday say that naturalism is a better explanation. Well, based upon what?
Well, hold on, Darwin. I think if we take that chain of logic back to the Santa Claus example, and I hate to argue on behalf of Santa Claus, but just taking your logic reasoning, then you can say, well, can either one of you say that there's not a guy who was born, his name is Santa Claus, he has children, and he wants to have children believe that the mythical Santa Claus exists, so he puts presents under the tree. And those kids would attest. Hold on. Those kids would attest to the fact that this Santa Claus exists and the things are under the tree. Like it's you can, if you're reasoning that way, you're reasoning.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you're reasoning that way, it almost seems like you really don't know, but you're just asserting that because you don't know, because I don't know, or because somebody else doesn't know, that the answer that you presented has to be accepted. And I don't think that's all. I don't think it's always true.
You're now moving the goalposts of the properties and attributes.
Did you not?
Hold on, Antonio. Hold on a second. Multiple. You've now moved the goalpost as to who and what Santa Claus is. Right now, if we say there's no evidence for God in the same way and in the same sense that there's no evidence for Santa Claus, then the question we can ask is, what would we necessarily expect to see if a God existed, and what would we necessarily expect to see if Santa Claus existed? Now, we can come up with necessary observations if Santa Claus existed. Now, when the atheist says that there's no evidence for God, they're going to have to tell us what we would necessarily see if a God existed. But do you know that every single time I've asked that question of hundreds of atheists, only one or two of them have even attempted to give me an explanation of what we would necessarily expect to see? They never do that. They tell me what they would prefer to see or what they would like to see. So
exactly,
the atheist reasoning and argumentation is specious. It's fallacious.
And did you not hear what we said, man, about the positive evidence that something does not exist? Do you think it would be very, very likely that a bunch of people will purposely plant gifts to fool their children into believing Santa Claus exists or something like that? Do you think that will be plausible on a very, very large scale? And not only would they have to plant gifts, they would have to somehow conjure up a way to like show Santa Claus flying around on reindeer on Christmas Eve and all this other stuff. They'll have to conjure up not just plenty gifts, but a number of different other things. And you don't see that happening, man. Come on, man.
Hold on. Let's really understand, I think, what we're saying. I agree with you guys 110%. Santa Claus is, and there are some things that we could predict to see if Santa Claus. I agree with you with that point, but I do not agree that what you're saying is necessary to prove that Santa Claus does not exist. It's
So positive evidence that something does not exist. You don't even consider that other side of the argument rather than merely the lack of evidence.
Let me see. It's almost like saying I have to positively prove that Bigfoot doesn't exist to believe that he doesn't exist. It's like if I had to go around trying to prove all these things that I don't believe exist, why can't I just take it on, hey, if sufficient evidence hasn't been presented to me to believe in the claim, then I just will not believe them all. Because I think that seems to be a better way of trying to assess the veracity of different claims.
Here's the whole problem.
All I'm telling you is we don't merely disbelieve in the existence of Santa Claus on merely the lack of evidence. That's all I'm putting forth to you.
Well, we know historically, we know definitively historically that Santa Claus is a fictional character. It's not just that we think he's we know the precise historical development in the recent history going back over 100 years. All right? All this, listen, any skeptic who argues that belief in God is like a belief in Santa Claus this is an absurd comparison. I just want to for the record, I didn't bring up Santa Claus at all. That was brought up. Somebody else brought up Santa Claus.
Right,
I would not make the mistake. MP, here's the big problem.
As an illustration.
Here's the problem, MP, is that skeptics are inconsistent and arbitrary in their reasonings. Because when you ask a skeptic, why don't you believe in God? What you will generally hear them say is that there's either no evidence or insufficient evidence, or no one has given them a compelling reason to believe in God, right? Now, when you apply that criterion that the skeptic has laid out and you say, are there things about the nature of existence that you cannot experience with your sense perception, such as that the physical world is in actuality real as opposed to an illusion of physicality, or that nature operates in a uniform or regular law-like way, or that there are fundamental absolute laws of logic which would govern and restrict our thinking along the lines of truth, right? They can't give you evidence for this. And in fact, if you listen to the hangout last night that Antonio had, when you cut out all of the bloviating of that blowhard hogtie, he finally had to admit he has no justification whatsoever for his core beliefs from which he reasons to all conclusions. Right? None whatsoever. But he wants to come to the table and expect that we should incline our mind and our reasoning toward what he's saying about things when he already admits that he has no justification foundationally for any conclusions that rest upon those foundations. I mean, it's hysterical. If I expected you, Multiple, to believe how much money I had in my pockets, and I told you I have $3 in my front pocket, $2 in my left front pocket, $2 in my front right pocket, and $2 more in my back pocket, and I told you I had a total of $7, and then I revealed to you that, well, you see, I'm really assuming what's in my front right pocket. Any conclusion that I have ultimately rests upon that chain link of that assumption. And so you see, when the atheists come to the table, they want to proclaim that they can reason, but if they follow their criterion, they'd have to abandon the idea that they can reason at all. And then they pull out the card, well, you have the same problem too. How do they know that? Right? The only way that they can say that I actually have that same problem is they have to have an a priori conclusion that God doesn't exist, or the Christian God doesn't exist.
So hold on. So just so I can understand this. So because the atheist doesn't know where they get their baseline reasoning from, then what's the second part? What does that lead to? What's that conclusion that you kept saying?
The in the worldview that a skeptic has,
Okay.
they have no justification for their most core beliefs about the nature of existence, from which they reason to other conclusions.
So they have no justification. So they don't know. So they have no justification. So they can't use reason correctly. Correct?
Suppose I told you that I have $4 on me, right? And you say, well, how did you arrive at that? Well, I said I have $2 in my left front pocket and $2 in my right front pocket. And then you find out that I'm just assuming that I have $2 in one of my pockets or both, right? You're gonna say, just because you think math corresponds in a one-to-one relationship in the physical world, that statement that I have $4 is just a glorified assumption. Right? And you see, Hogtie, when I pinned him to the corner, had to admit it last night. I'd recommend that you watch the Hangout. It was quite embarrassing for him. You'll notice, Antonio, that he wants to bloviate his way out of these discussions. You know how many times I asked him a question and his responses weren't addressing my very simple and clear question? I mean, he was doing more tap dancing than Sammy Davis Jr. did on TV.
I mean, he likes to give a complete package of
please. Please. I mean, what you got last night was quintessential Hogtie. It's the same bloviating all the time. And until I repeatedly demanded that he responded to my specific question, then he finally did.
I'm not saying necessarily his points are rational or irrational. I'm just saying that he likes to package things. That's just how he, goes about the conversation. That's just my consistent experience with him. And everybody has their own.
Look up the word bloviate, Antonio.
Everybody has their own style and how they want to put forth points they're making. Like, you have a particular style he does, Brother Matthew does, Christian Man does. I just try to look at what people's styles are and to see.
All right. Well, we have two people in the YouTube text chat who are saying DD would hardly let Hogtie finish. That is absolute baloney and malarkey.
It is true to say
he talked for 80% of the airtime, and I kept there silent. And the only time I interrupted him was either when he was simply not addressing my question, or
That's
he
so
was
true.
simply moving the goalpost. Now, the second thing is we have here Dave Brennan is in the Hangout, and he's saying DD is misrepresenting Hogtie again. Well, come into the Hangout, Dave Brennan.
Yeah, I'm invited.
You say your name. Come into the Hangout and put your money where your mouth is and spell out how I misrepresented Hogtie.
Yeah, DD.
Hold on a second, Hilarious. So, Dave Brennan, do you have the testicular fortitude to actually come on the audio and spell out how I misrepresented Hogtie? I'd love to hear it. Go ahead, Hilarious.
Yeah, I was just saying, sorry about the last tango. I think in the UK here it was about 5 o'clock, so I literally fell asleep. So, but yeah, I think this is a good time. But anyway, I was just saying, yeah, like he really didn't really let you speak at all. And then what I realized, the main thing I realized is when you had him in a corner, he would try and divert the actual topic
Exactly.
into something else,
Bingo.
and then he would say that you're over talking him. It was hilarious.
Right. Of course it is. Watch it. I let him. I kept silent for much of the conversation. But you see, what he wants to do is he wants to bloviate his way in the discussion. He just wants to lecture in a professorial way. But you see, when I kept on, sticking to the question, he finally had to admit that he has no justification for the foundations of his beliefs from which he, quote, reasons from. And I pointed out that therefore everything he says from within his worldview is incoherent. And the reason why it's incoherent is because he can't establish that the law of non-contradiction is the case. You see, other than him assuming the law of non-contradiction, well, why would he assume it? You see, skeptics and atheists are walking contradictions and a bag of inconsistencies. And you notice how he tried to run away when I said, "Are your starting points about the nature of reality arbitrary?" But you see, in fact, they were arbitrary. And then when I gave him the dictionary definition, then he didn't want to go by the dictionary definition. See, this is what happens: is you get a skeptic like Hogtie in here, and he's very verbose, and he's a bag of hot air, and he really doesn't say anything.
Are you there, multiple?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you have a response to that, maybe?
I didn't hear the whole thing, so I feel bad about not responding. But from what I usually know, Didi's argument is to be, I think it's kind of mistaking this whole I can't use something now because I don't know how it kind of came about. That's kind of how I'm understanding it. And it's to me, that's kind of like I can't drive a car because I don't know how it was built. I don't know who built it.
No, that's not
I think
the
there are
argument.
two different applications.
That's not the argument.
And also like two different applications of the
That's not
of
the
the
argument.
word.
That's not the argument. He wants to use all these colorful metaphors, like, well, I have these tools in my tool bag. Well, what
I didn't say. I just was saying that's just how I'm understanding the appealing to an analogy. It's poor taste. I'm sorry.
Well, when he gives us all this about whatever, it doesn't matter what he's reasoning, is whatever he's reasoning about, and he would like us to conform our thinking to his reasoning, because remember he said that he believed that his conclusions are true, and if he believes his conclusions are true, he's trying to appeal to us to conform our thinking to what he concludes is true. But his conclusions are predicated on a number of foundational assumptions about the nature of reality. So you see, when I kept on asking him, how are you able to ascertain or verify that something is true? And he kept on changing the question by saying that he believes things are true. There's no doubt he believes things are true. Right? So all we got was, like I said, Hogtie doing his impersonation of Sammy Davis Jr., tap dancing and dodging. And by the way, this is not something I'm saying behind his back. I said it to his face in the discussion. You see, I tried to point out to him, which he didn't even understand, that in order for statements about reality to be meaningful, is that statement cannot ever coexist with its negation, right? Which means one has to presuppose the law of non-contradiction.
Yeah, I'd just like to.
Go ahead, Hilarious.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Don, I feel like you're one of the best theists that really go deep into the logics and rationale. I feel like you go deep and like like this is from my opinion, from what I've seen so far. I feel like you're very good at the logical arguments and getting them into a corner. I've
Well,
realized that about your
you
arguments.
just
Like
have
you're
to
pretty.
understand how they think and reason. That's all.
I mean, I was just saying like you're very technical and that's good. Like I like your arguments.
Yeah. Well,
Check this out. Atheist Ranger says the precept argument is built on the assumption that the Christian God exists. If you can't prove that assumption, the argument is pointless.
okay. So, Atheist Ranger, would you like to come in the room and to defend that claim? I would be happy to discuss it with you, Atheist Ranger. Would you like to come in?
And Atheist Ranger is actually pretty cool. I like talking to
Okay.
him.
So let me ask you this, Atheist Ranger. If you do not start that it is the case that the God of the Bible exists, could you tell me how you prove something? Right? How do you prove something? Do you mean persuade somebody? Or do you mean prove in the sense of verification? So why don't you come into the room and we can discuss your view on, quote, the precept argument. Okay, Dave Brandon says you misrepresented him by once again, DD, by saying any conclusion he makes from his base assumptions are therefore assumptions. I don't think you know what an internal critique is. Well, Dave, why don't you come into the room and we can discuss it instead of doing your pot shots from the text? The fact of the matter is, what I said was any conclusion that he makes, which is based upon starting core assumptions about the nature of reality, if he doesn't have a justification for it, any conclusion he makes is just simply a glorified assumption. So it's that simple. But if I'm so wrong and you're so right, Dave, why don't you come into the room and we can discuss it?
Yeah, they take these shots constantly from the outside, but don't ever want to come in and talk with us about it. I mean, if we're really stupid, then why don't you come in here and make us look stupid?
Okay, so Dave says properly basic beliefs are not arbitrary. Well, of course they're arbitrary. You assume them. And the reason why you assume them is because you have a desire to make sense of existence. That existence should make sense. That's simple. How about this, Dave? That the physical world around us is actually real, as opposed to that it's an illusion of physicality. How choosing that it's physically real is not arbitrary. I wish these tech snipers had the testicular fortitude to come in and discuss it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they just like you guys reading what they say. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Darwin's, you know what? I think this is. I'm going to say this. I think perfectly to illustrate how I understand this argument. It seems to me, now, first, when I said that this is almost an argument to say that just because I don't know who created my car, that means I can't drive it, and we all saw the kind of the folly in that. And then it even got more complicated because then you started to elaborate on that point. And another analogy would be is that, I drive, and all of us drive cars, and we follow certain rules, then it's like, who created those rules? And does anyone know who wrote those rules that we, and so I can't justify following these rules because I don't know who actually wrote them. And not to say there's no record of it or anything, but I don't really think that's analogous to how we, what reality is and how we experience reality.
MP. When atheists reason, whenever they make positive claims about the nature of reality, those claims are predicated on core beliefs, are they not?
Exactly, yeah, I agree.
All right. So those conclusions are only as sound or trustworthy as the validity of their core beliefs, but they have no justification for it. But these are the same people who saying, they say, well, how do you know that the Bible is God's word? And I say, because God has revealed it. And they go, well, that's not good enough for me. I want something external to God's revelation that He revealed it.
And the funny thing is, there's so many prophecies and so many science. There's so much. There's actually science in the Bible. If you look at the way the prophets describe things.
Well, hilarious. The point is there are many evidences that are in support that the Bible is the God's word, but ultimately, all you're going to be simply reasoning with them is that it is more probable than not that the God of the Bible exists. And they can always squirm out of that by just saying, you know what? Well, things happen, right? When you show skeptics that the theory of evolution is about as astronomically improbable as one could codify in terms of an exponential notation, their response always is, well, you know what? There's still a chance. Right? But then when you apply that same reasoning, what they want to believe that nature operates in a uniform way so that they can reason, well, you know what? That the events that we see are indistinguishable from chance. And the only reason why they prefer uniformity over chance is because they reason of the improbability of those consistent sequences. So you see, they're inconsistent on how they apply what they believe is probable or improbable. The bottom line is this: the skeptic mindset is arbitrary, inconsistent, and irrational.
Yeah, and honestly,
but I still think it's interesting. We moved a couple of places, and I just wanted to shift back to my point. And maybe I wasn't really clear, but my point was really to understand this connection between not understanding how something, not knowing how something kind of develops, and the use of that particular thing. Because I don't know how logic came into existence, but I use it. So it's like, I don't know how the rules for my driving have came in. I don't know who built my car.
Okay.
But use is different than the use of what I'm doing is different than knowledge. We use knowledge. Would you not agree to that? We use knowledge. So I mean, not knowledge. I'm sorry, logic. We use logic. I apologize.
We're not talking about logic.
Can I say something?
Here. We're talking about, when we say the laws of logic, we're talking about a fundamental conception about the state of reality. And let me express it this way, MP. The law of non-contradiction could be expressed in this way: that for all entities or events that exist, that they can never coexist at the same time and in the same sense with their negation, right? That's one way of expressing the law of non-contradiction. For any entity or event that exists, that it cannot coexist at the same time in the same sense with its negation. Now, that is a metaphysical view on the nature of reality, right? Now, this is a privileged belief that skeptics hold to in order to make any verbal statement that is to be meaningful, because without that precondition of the law of non-contradiction, then no statement can be meaningful if its negation could coexist. But you see, the atheists want to make all sorts of pronouncements that they believe are meaningful in and of themselves, but they haven't justified their assumption of the law of non-contradiction.
So now I agree with you. They don't know. I don't know. They cannot know. How does that now translate to use? It's just like, knowing versus use. How does that translate to use? Now you're saying they can't use it. It's like, I don't know where my car came from, but but that doesn't mean I can't drive it. Drive use and knowledge of origin are two different things.
Whoa. You're confusing functionality with an actual state of affairs. The issue is not that things function in a certain way. Atheists and skeptics can't even support the idea that something works in a certain way. They can't do it. And if there's any atheist out there who's in the audience or in the text, if you want to come and show me that you can say that reality works in a certain way, tell me how you derive that. So when you bring up the analogy with a car, you're already presupposing that the car functions in a certain way. And even though you don't have knowledge of how it works, It just keeps on working that way, consistency, and so you can cooperate with that functionality. But you see, the car represents physicality, does it not, MP?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay, so you're presupposing that the car functions. That presupposes that nature operates in some law-like ways. If you do X, you get Y. If you do W, you get Z.
I'm following you all the way down.
Okay, but you see, based upon sense perception alone, the skeptic cannot justify in any way that nature works. Because what you see is indistinguishable from a chance universe. Right? And the reason why the skeptic believes that things work in a certain way is because they reason that the consistencies that they see are more likely to be the result of a law-like background versus chance, because of the improbability of chance producing those consistencies, right? So you see, the idea that nature works is a grand assumption on part of the skeptic. He cannot produce a logically deductive argument that anything works. Even David Hume, the atheist, the great atheist of the I think it was the 18th century, they can't even justify cause and effect. So an atheist can't even say.
So then how would I be wrong in saying, because I'm saying I agree with that. They cannot know how these things were derived. That we agree with. But you're saying now, and you just literally said that they can't use it in any meaningful way. They can't. I forgot the term you used. You said logical something.
They can't say anything that's meaningful in the sense that everything they say is predicated on a whole series of unjustifiable, arbitrary assumptions about basic way reality is or operates. For all they know is they don't know that the law of non-contradiction holds. They don't know that nature works in a certain way. How about this, MP? What if we were even to grant them that the law of non-contradiction holds at all times in all places? They still couldn't justify their reason. Do you know why? It's because they have to presuppose that nature works in some law-like way, that their brain states are going to be operating at some basic reliable level. Now, they may strongly believe that, but you see, according to the atheist criterion, it doesn't matter how deep and strong your belief is in the existence of something. You have to have a justification for it. So when an atheist says, well, I don't believe the revelation of God, I want some other justification that the God of the Bible exists. And say, okay, fine. Do you apply that criterion to your belief that nature operates in a law-like way? What's your justification for that? There is no justification from the skeptic worldview that nature works in a certain way. Now, it might be a brute fact that nature works in a law-like way, as opposed to everything is chance. But there are no brute facts that are ascertainable.
Multiple, you're making too much noise.
Yeah, there is a lot of noise going on there, multiple. But yeah, Didi is right. Atheists will say without hesitation that it doesn't matter how much the Christian strongly believes God exists, that doesn't make it true. But they don't apply that to their own worldview.
You see, in order for atheists' statements about reality to be coherent and meaningful, there have to be a number of preconditions that have to be true, not just believed. Right? The physical world has to actually exist. The physical world has to operate at some uniform or law-like way. Their cognitive functioning has to operate in some reliable way. But here's an even additional problem. The overwhelming majority of the skeptics that we deal with are strong believers in the theory of evolution, that their minds are just simply an emergent property over billions of years. But if that's the case, that their minds are the product of evolution, they have no reason to trust their cognitive reasoning, because evolution selects for survival, not for truth. And then there's another problem, because the overwhelming majority of skeptics are materialists. And if they're materialists, that means the manner in which they're reasoning, their brain states are reasoning for atheism and against theism. They could not have thought otherwise, because you see, those brain states are simply the product of a law-like background of antecedent conditions. But you see, they want to believe that they could freely reason to the truth that there is no God. But how can you have freedom in a universe that is governed by laws? So you see, the skeptic's position is incoherent and irrational on many different levels.
Yeah, I'd just like to say as well, if you think about the world, like the way it works, we think that, all the testing that we do, the scientific findings that we do, we think that the world works in the way that we think it works based on our testing. What if our testing is limiting us to find out other ways of how the world works? Because, for example, obviously we know, there's gravity, but what makes them think it works the way that we scientifically think it works?
Hilarious. When you say we know that gravity works, who's we?
As in, we know that there's something pulling things to the earth.
Well, the
I'm
atheists.
saying,
No, the atheists don't know that. In the Christian worldview, that the world that God, the God of the Bible, has created, He has made us so that we can know some things, such that nature operates in some law-like and regular way. Ultimately, not only by innate revelation, but by special revelation. But an atheist doesn't know that nature operates in a law-like way. The fact that objects are attracted to each other depending on their individual mass, those consistencies that we see just could be a series of colossal chance coincidences in a massive universe, for all they know. Leonard Susskind, a world-renowned physicist who, I believe he's an atheist, he said, for all we know, physics might operate entirely differently elsewhere, other than what we're seeing. And so what we're seeing could be a series of coincidences. Now people say, wow, it's ridiculous. Well, it's ridiculous because you have a core belief without justification, when you reject the God of the Bible, that nature operates in a law-like way. So it's only ridiculous because it doesn't comport with your assumption of existence. But you see, the atheists have trouble with people assuming things. Say, these Christians, they believe in God without justification. Yeah. Well, what do you believe in, Mr. Atheist, without justification? A whole lot of things.
Yeah, I'd just also like to say, without even using the scientific method, if you look at the way the world works, if you look at how these animals, they try to bring us down to the level of an animal, to say that we came from gorillas, we came from apes, we evolved. But if you look at us and animals, it's almost like, if you look at it from general sense, it's almost like animals are programmed. Like if you look at the way they just solely rely on their instincts, and when a bee is born, it works as a working bee. It goes and collects pollen. It's just innate for them. It's like they were made program. It's like they were programmed. But if you look at humans, the way we create things, the way we're innovative, the way we come up with new ideas, it's like we're totally different from animals, and that kind of links to the aspect of being created in God's image. Because if you look at God's characteristics, He's a creative being. Look at all the stars and galaxies and planets He's created, and look at what we do on this planet. We make all these machines, all these computers. So His image is reflecting on us. So if you look at the things that we see in our daily lives, it further proves how animals are not the same as us and how we are made in a different way.
Well, the atheist will respond that your position is a God of the gaps argument. You see, because they're assuming that naturalism will be eventually explained. And so we'll understand. And so that because you see certain complexities, that therefore you're saying God did it. But you see, the moment somebody says that's a God of the gaps argument, they're presupposing the materialism of the gaps argument. They're presupposing that materialism can account for the state of affairs that we observe in our existence, but they simply can't. You see, when Richard Dawkins, in his book *The Blind Watchmaker*, and I'll paraphrase him, he said, atheism was tenable before Darwin's theory of evolution, but with the advent of Darwin's theory of evolution, it has provided atheists with intellectual fulfillment. Now, those are Richard Dawkins' words, not mine. Well, how has it provided atheists with intellectual fulfillment? Because atheists, the overwhelming majority of them are materialists. And for those who aren't materialists, they can't even argue for non-materialism. The theory of evolution was their own materialistic creation story, their own creation myth that allowed them to explain what even Richard Dawkins says is the apparent design. Dawkins himself says there is a apparent design in existence. But you know what? Since we're grown up and we're not little children who believe in a sky fairy, we can believe that through chance and happenstance and through natural selection, that all of these complexities can be accounted for by random occurrences followed by a step-by-step survival. But that's just a pipe dream. That can't be justified. You see, the reason why Darwin's theory of evolution has widespread consensus is it because it's the only materialistic creation story that they have. And with the advent of Darwin's theory of evolution, it allowed scientists who thought themselves to be wise to say, well, you know what? I don't need no stinking God. I can explain things scientifically, and look at all that we've learned. Right?
Hey, Dee, Dave asked, do you agree that you had to first use properly basic beliefs to read and understand the Bible?
Who asked that question?
A gentleman, Dave, on the side chat.
No, in the Christian worldview, God has made our basic cognitive functioning to operate in a certain way. So, for example, that God created human beings not to even basically question the regularity of nature. People just automatically believe it because that's the way he's made our mind thinks. So it's not an assumption, it's an endowment or an enablement of the way God made our minds. Now, from a secular point of view, if you reject the revelation of God, you would assume that these certain basic cognitive starting points are assumptions or properly basic beliefs. But from the God of the Bible's point of view, that's not the case.
Yes. But I just got to say something. I think Jay can be a cool person because she's out there in the side chat, but Jay, it's not going to mean anything if you're sitting here criticizing from the side, but you don't want to come in because you think Dee doesn't play well with others, as you put it. And you said that you are doing other stuff and you just find this entertaining, but you clearly are doing other stuff, but you have the time to criticize. If you got the time to criticize from the side, left and right, then you have the time to come in and have a discussion. But I don't know if you should even be taken seriously if you're just going to sit there and criticize from the side all day. I mean, it's not like people are going to be flipping back and forth, having conversations and reading the chat all the time. Okay,
so Melee Grisfella says it's not random, doofus.
Yeah, right? That's Jay.
Now, so let me ask you this. Genius out there.
That's Jay. That's her name, but that's just her.
Well, I'll just refer to the person as Melee. If it's not random, could you tell me what accounts for the specific arrangement of the base molecules of information in the DNA double helix? What produced the specific arrangement of the nucleotides? Do you know? Melee?
It doesn't make sense because you would ask her questions, and then the hangout would have to catch up on the outside.
Well,
and then
here's
she
the
would
answer.
type.
The answer is random mutations. Okay, within the neo-Darwinian synthesis, random mutations that occurred that would accrue in a linear fashion were then preserved in a step-by-step survival. Each step where there was an accrual of nucleotides, they were preserved because the chance mutations and their specific arrangement prior to survival produced an increase of fitness, right? But the specific arrangement that produced functionality and an increase of fitness, that arrangement of the nucleotides was produced by random mutations. Now, each individual mutation is not random. It has a direct cause, but the specific arrangement is random, right?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, you know, what really annoys me. It's just like personally, you know, going on with the evolution. I feel like it's become so mainstream now. Like like for example, when I was in school, like in order to pass science, that was one of the units or part of the criteria that I had to meet. I had to literally learn evolution, and not only learn it, but literally drill it into my brain constantly. And I find that it's conflicting with my beliefs because I'll be sitting here and they'll be asking questions in exam like, how did the world begin? And I'd basically have to sit there and write lies. And I feel like it's damaging kids because if you
Well,
think about it,
you're just giving them the answers that they want in their fictional worldview.
If we're talking about science, then they gotta make sure that it's both evolution and in other, contrary sciences being taught at school. There's not obviously not everybody's going to accept it.
Well, right. Well, see, right now, the materialists in academia have a stranglehold on origin stories. They want to say, well, we believe in science. Well, you see, the universal common ancestry is not observable, testable, or repeatable. Simply not. It's a historical science. Now, I'm not anti-inferences, but some inferences are better than others. The bottom line here is this: had Charles Darwin known about the monumental complexity of the cell and the staggering complexity of the genetic information that is in a linear fashion in DNA, he would have abandoned evolution. In fact, he said that if 100 years that the fossil record doesn't bear out my theory will have failed. Well, guess what? Other than a small handful of debatable so-called transitional fossils, the fossil record has not borne out his theory of evolution. And in fact, the fossil record is what you would expect to find if creationism was true, with a cataclysmic hydraulic catastrophe such as the flood. And in fact, if anybody questions what I'm saying, then I have a simple question for you. If the fossil record actually demonstrates transition rather than stasis, why is it that one of the most renowned experts on the theory of evolution, Stephen Jay Gould, propagated the idea of punctuated equilibrium? And punctuated equilibrium was the idea that all of the missing transitional forms are explained away because evolution happened in such quick bursts that it left no record behind in the so-called fossils. So you see, Stephen Jay Gould, who was an anti-creationist and could not have been a more staunch promoter of evolution, his very theory that he promoted, punctuated equilibrium, demonstrates that the fossil record does not exemplify transition, but stasis.
Yeah, does anybody?
Oh, sorry. I agree with what you're saying, Darren's theory, because when I see examples of supposed transitional forms, they are not just always just complete structures, just always complete skeletons.
Melee, if you'd like to come in, I have to spend some time with the family. I'll be back on again at 7 Central Time. I don't know what time your zone is, Melee, and we can discuss your claim that we have billions of transitional fossils. You see, here's the one question you need to ask yourself, right? See, now notice that because she doesn't like my statement, she's going to accuse me of misquoting Stephen Jay Gould. Do you notice that? This is the knee-jerk reaction. Okay. Melee, Stephen Jay Gould was one of the chief promoters of punctuated equilibrium. That is not a quote mine. That is a historical fact. You want to look that up, Melee? Stephen Jay Gould and punctuated equilibrium. Right? And what is punctuated equilibrium? Is that evolution happened in the transitional parts that are absent in the phylogenetic tree in such rapid bursts, they left behind no residual fossils. Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any evidence for the pre-flip?
Okay, well, Melegris, you're you're equivocating on the word evolution. The word evolution in its base meaning means change. And nobody questions that there is biological variation in reproduction. There's no doubt about that. But that is not the same thing as variation, generation after generation, of whether you're talking about microorganisms or high-level beings, can produce an ever increase of hierarchical complex genetic information. Right? Yeah, well, Melegris, whatever your name is, I think I understand Darwin's theory of evolution far better than you can even imagine. Right? So why don't you come into the room at 7 o'clock Central Time, and you can confront me with my errors and my misunderstandings about Darwin's theory of evolution. I already pointed out to you when you said it's not random, doofus. Well, yeah, I did. I showed you that the arrangement of random molecular nucleotides accruing is random, short of each step-by-step survival.
I was waiting to deal with him better if she like. I'll moderate and I'll make sure, even though I don't think you'll treat her unfairly, Dee, but just to assuage her in a way.
Right, that's fine. It's not going to happen. Listen, I can already see from the tone of Melegris, she or he, is it a she? She's not going to come in here. I can tell by the tone of the post. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, the thing is, Jay can be a nice lady, but at the same time, I can't take her seriously because she constantly likes to just criticize from the outside. But
she goes, "You didn't actually quote him. I've read all of Gould's books. That's laughable. Look at UC Berkeley for punctuated equilibrium. You do realize Gould's original hypothesis. Now, what did I misstate? That Gould was probably one of the lead popularizers of punctuated equilibrium. And punctuated equilibrium was promoted to account for the myriad of missing transitional forms in the phylogenetic tree. And that's something you can't dispute. Because if there are not a myriad of missing transitional forms, then that would make punctuated equilibrium utterly superfluous and meaningless. But you see, Gould himself was a brilliant paleontologist. He knew the fossil record, and he knew that there was a myriad of transitional forms that were absolutely missing if a universal common ancestry was true. And that's why he spent much of his career popularizing punctuated equilibrium. Anyway, I've got to run, but Meleagris will not come back at 7 Central Time. Trust me.
Of course not. And again, she's a nice lady, and I'm not saying that she's not knowledgeable on certain things, but she is innocent. She doesn't. She isn't comfortable um engaging people who know this stuff, in one-on-one conversations. She'd rather stick around in Steve's rooms where she has other people who agree with her surrounding her, and then she'll maybe engage you if you come into Steve's rooms while she has other people surrounding her. But in one-on-one conversations, it's not going to happen.
Well, just keep this in mind. Whenever you're dealing with somebody like Meleagris on the issue of evolution, you always have to keep this in mind, is that they will equivocate on the meaning of the word evolution, right? They will use the word evolution simply to mean variation and reproduction, which nobody questions. And they will also use it to mean a universal common ancestry. Okay? A universal common ancestry is not observable. One would have to be omniscient in order to observe that. Now, the concept of universal common ancestry is inferred by people who only want to adopt for a purely materialistic explanation of origins, because they want to come in the name of science. Because you see, science can't even support science. You have to adopt certain metaphysical, unscientific views about the nature of reality in order to promote science. It's that simple, right? Anyway, I could go on, but I'll be back on later if you guys still want to talk about the evolution. But you see,
I'll definitely
evolution as change, evolution as mere, like, for example, Antonio, if you have children, your children are going to be a little bit different than you are. That's evolution. That's variation and reproduction. But that is the fact that there are variation and reproduction. And even if you have mutations that produce a novel effect that might produce an increase of fitness, that doesn't support universal common ancestry, because mutations producing a novel effect that might cause an increase of fitness does not justify the notion that random mutations followed by a step-by-step survival will accrue and produce a gargantuan amount of a hierarchical complex genetic information, right? One does not necessitate the other. So evolution, meaning biological variation and reproduction, is something that nobody disputes. But evolution, that there's a universal common ancestry, that is not something that can actually be justified by the evidence. But you see, the reason why it's dominant is because people in academia since the time of Darwin have simply decided that they don't need no stinking God, and that they will worship the material world as their creator. It's that simple. It's not science versus religion. It is religion versus religion. It is the religion of materialism versus the religion of the God of the Bible. Anyway, I gotta run, but I'll be back later.
All right. I might actually, if you're gonna be around, well, he's gone, but I'll definitely think about doing another hangout in a few hours, just talking about evolution. I think another hangout is in order, but I guess until then, I think this pretty much wraps up this hangout. I think we covered a lot of great ground today, but do any of you guys have anything to say before we end this hangout?
The Snickers were
just
delicious.
What you say?
Snickers were delicious.
All right.
yeah, I'd just like to say something. Antonio, what time are you doing the next hangout? Because here it's nearly 11 o'clock at night. So
yeah, that may not work very well with you, man. If I do it 2 hours from now, it's gonna be 1 o'clock where you are. So I mean, I can't really help that one, man.
I've got a lot of things I wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, Don was kind of talking a lot, but yeah, I wanted to talk because I don't really get to go in these hangouts because the schedule is a bit, tricky. I tried to find hangouts and can't really find any. So
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do more of these if possible, because I think there's a lot of things that's been on my mind, particularly that I want to start talking about more often. So, is there anything you want to say, Christian, man, before we end? Christian man, are you there, bro? I don't know if he's AFK or if he's having mic problems, but I don't really know what to do about that. But to those who are watching, I appreciate it like always. I really, really do hope some of you who aren't subscribed, please do subscribe, and we'll have more of these hangouts coming soon. So thanks for watching. Take care. God bless and peace.